Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I met Tara Finley when I was about 21 years old at a black tie dinner for an acquaintance's 21st birthday being hosted at an upmarket venue in Atlanta. In truth, I have no recollection of whose 21st it actually was, or even what I was actually doing there. I found myself sitting 2 seats away from her. Of course, it was so long ago that I don't remember many of the details. Most of them are indeterminate, obscure, and rather vague, eroded by the haziness of time, rather like an old letter, with writing so faded you can barely remember anything at all. So I cling to the fragments of what I can actually remember. All I recall is me and this gorgeous, mysterious young lady called Tara, as if it was only ever us and nobody else. Even the fabulous tables with their starched tablecloths, the guests, the speeches, and everything else just fades into the background, literally extinguished in my mind. It's like we were the meat and potatoes on the plates that evening, and everything else, the vegetables, are superfluous, redundant, and let's just say surplus to requirements. We had a connection, a spark, an incorrigible attraction, and if I knew anything, I had to see her again. I was attracted to her long Titian colouring that bounced on her shoulders in pretty curls, her ocean blue eyes and fair skin so fragile. It's often the case that opposites do attract, and that was the case with Tara and myself. I had olive skin, dark hair, hazel eyes, so I appreciated a look that contrasted dramatically to my own. For to me, Tara was like a princess. She was at Georgia State University, situated in downtown Atlanta, where she was studying medicine, while I lived about 9 hours away in West Virginia and was enrolled with West Virginia State University. My family lived near the rural town of Elkins. Elkins, a mountain-rich oasis where we lived very close to the Monongahela National Forest. The name means falling banks, due to the geographic instability of the riverbanks there. In the forest itself there's an abundance of wild animals and an extraordinary large black bear population, where people have had some rather tense encounters with black bears. But you'll find everything here, from wild turkey, white-tailed deers, squirrels, rabbit, snowshoe hares, woodstock and grouse, bobcats, beavers, red and grey foxes, bobcats, mink and raccoons. And I've seen them all from time to time, sometimes even bounding across our backyard, as our property literally borders the state park. It was in the 80s, and so my relationship with Tara Finley was conducted with the occasional telephone call and lots of letters that we wrote regularly to each other. Let me tell you, in those days receiving a letter from Tara was possibly the most exciting thing in the entire world to me, and it beats social media platforms any day of the week. My girlfriend would occasionally come and visit and stay overnight with my family. I had 2 brothers, an older brother, Riley, who has Asperger's, which is on the autism spectrum. That means his social and communicative skills are seriously compromised, and he was rigidly structured in everything he did. But he had an incredible memory for dates like no one I've ever known. You could ask him when Queen Elizabeth I was born, or the date of Mary Queen of Scots' birthday, or the day that President Lincoln died, and he would know the exact dates. He could tell you the date of the American Civil War, or the date when America entered the Second World War. My other brother was called Wesley. He was about 5 years my junior. He had such an astute character. He pondered life so seriously, and was always so perceptive and discerning about everything. My mother, Henrietta, was the kind of woman that most men would dream to marry, and every son would wish to have as a mother. She was a domestic goddess in the kitchen, producing outstanding food that would make you salivate. She was dutifully attentive to my father's every need, and to us, of course. My father was a phenomenal hunter, fisher, explorer, and brilliant at building construction, a man of so many diverse talents. The house where we lived was an old Georgian mansion that my parents had restored and refurbished over the years. I loved how this imposing ornate white building, with its pleasing square symmetry, just looked so dramatic against the viridescent countryside, sprinkled with American beeches, maples, birch, loblolly pines, magnolias, yellow polars, and chestnut oaks. Before long, my blooming relationship with Tara flourished like a cherry blossom tree in spring, full of so much potential, promise, and beauty. My parents liked her very much, but my brother Wesley thought she was all that, and warned me that I should never ever let her go, for I would never find anyone like her ever again. Did I not tell you my brother was wise? A very sharp, discerning head on such small shoulders, so mature, so sagacious for his young, tender years. I was completely beguiled by Tara, of course I was, and already envisaged that one day I would tie the knot with her. She was the kind of person I envisaged spending the rest of my life with, until that is, when I met Blaise Mackenzie. Sometimes we reach a crossroads in life, where you might see two roads lying ahead of you. The question is, what road do you take? If you were a hiker, it would be a no-brainer, would it not? If you were to access a mountain range via a hiking route, there is no question of a doubt you would take a clearer path, where you could guarantee you would take a safe, predictable route, with a happy ending. You would avoid taking a precipitous path wrought with risky challenges and sheer cliff faces, unless of course you wanted to live on the edge and dice with danger. But most of us were not exactly like that. But when it came to Blaise Mackenzie, she was that unpredictable, unsafe, reckless and treacherous path, the one with jagged cliff faces and sheer drops, the one that was indeterminate, potentially perilously dangerous. And I regret to admit that that is what attracted me to her. How naive, impressionable, and incredibly foolish I was. But I attribute this to the green shoots of my young age. My ignorance and restless spirit within me fancied taking a ride on a merry-go-round and never getting off. By contrast, Tara was like the road well-travelled, safe, secure, dependable, reliable, trustworthy. And let me tell you that is the road you should unequivocally take, if ever you're given the choice. But I didn't. I was so completely sucked in by the bad influences of Blaise Mackenzie, who was as destructive as her name suggests, a wildfire that could so easily get out of control. I had met her at the university, and was attracted to her untamed feral personality, that was like an unbridled wild horse that do whatever the hell she liked, and stuff the consequences. I think I'd grown up in such a loving home, with boundaries secured in all the right places, knowing right from wrong, and how to behave myself. But Blaise had come from a broken home. She was unpredictable, very exciting, and that is what drew me to her, like a bee to a honeypot. Several young men at the university warned me off Blaise. "You don't want to get involved with Blaise. Let's just say she's not a good sort. You'll get your fingers burnt." Would I listen? Absolutely not. I thought I knew better. I was completely infatuated by her outrageous, over-the-top behaviour, from what I thought was a very beguiling young woman, who was like a bag of firecrackers with a warning, "Don't touch, dangerous." But the mischievous, boyish side of myself was determined to strike the matches. I knew I couldn't go out with Blaise until I had done the ethical, decent thing and broken up with Tara first. When my brother Wesley learnt about what I was about to do, he was incandescent. "I'm 5 years younger than you, bro," he said to me, "but I'm a hell of a lot wiser. You want to get rid of the best thing that ever happened to you for a piece of fluff that excites you because she's a bad girl who doesn't behave right? What's wrong with you? You're pathetic. Once you've dumped Tara, do you know you're unlikely to ever get her back? Don't come crying to me, bro, if that happens," he said, "because I won't feel at all sorry for you. You'll get what you deserve. I know if Tara was my girlfriend, I'd guard her like the crown jewels. You're an idiot." I was naturally very nervous about breaking up with Tara. I tried so many times to broach the subject. We spent a lovely weekend together, but I didn't have the nerve to break up with her. I knew I had to do it, but I was completely gormless. I drove her to the Charleston train station, where she was catching a train to Atlanta, and moments before she got onto the train, I piped, "I don't think we should see each other again, Tara. I think we should call it quits on our relationship." Tara didn't even look at me. She didn't argue. She didn't say anything. She pushed straight past me, climbed onto the train, and found a seat. And she sat down on that seat, fumbling around in her handbags to find a book, and stared vacantly at the pages. I'm tapping on the outside window to get her attention, but she ignores me, not even glancing up at me once to give me a second look. Soon the train chugs away, and I'm left feeling like a deflated balloon that has lost all its gas, and like a real brute. It punched me in my heart that I'd hurt Tara, because I really loved her. I had to choose, though, between two women, and I was intrigued by the wild card, so to speak. When I got home, I wrote to Tara. I felt so bad, and every one of the letters I sent her was returned back to me in the post, untouched, unread, and unopened. That was a real cold slap in the face for me. I couldn't blame her. I had really hurt her. My brother was right. Why would she want to have anything to do with me ever again? And that thought really bothered me. I even took a 9-hour journey up to Atlanta just to go and see her. When I knocked on the apartment that Tara shared with 5 other boarders, a handsome-looking young man opened the door to me. His hair was tousled, his clothes casual. He looked at me with a raised brow and said, "Who are you?" I answered, "I'm here to see Tara." The man frowned. "You're not that loser Jack who dumped her, are you? Because if you're crying over spilt milk, you're not going to get Tara back. She wants nothing more to do with you. And I don't blame her either. You're a loser, bro. Get the heck out of here." "Look, I need to speak to Tara. I feel bad about how things ended between us." "You dumped her, bro, when she was getting onto a train. That was a low thing to do. You broke the girl's heart. You don't deserve her. She's far too good for you. Why don't you get the hell out of here? Leave her alone. You dumped her, so what are you doing here now?" "Please," I begged. "I need to speak to her. I want to apologize for everything that happened." "I'll see what I can do," he said, closing the door behind him. I stood on the front doorstep, feeling like a prize idiot. I didn't like how protective the young man was towards Tara. Was he her boyfriend? Oh, God, no. I began to feel stabbed with an all-consuming jealousy. What was wrong with me? I was the one that had dumped Tara, but now the thought that this man was sniffing around her like an obsessive bull terrier didn't bring me any reassurance. It was like I wanted to snatch Tara away, rekindle our relationship, rather like a kid who didn't pay any attention to his toy, but once somebody else is interested in it, I wanted to snatch it right back and claim it as my own. Tara came to the door, looking as pretty as ever. Her curtain of red hair bounced buoyantly on her shoulders, but there was no sparkle in her eyes reserved for me, no warm, engaging smile on her face. I noticed she avoided looking at me in the eyes, something she'd never ever done before. She was brisk and abrupt with me. "What are you doing here?" she barked. "Tara, you've been sending all the letters I wrote to you back. I've been worried senseless about you. Can't I at least have a word with you?" "About what? You told me everything you felt when I boarded that train. I don't think there is anything else to say. You made your position clear, did you not?
Tara, don't be like this, please. Don't be difficult. Humour me. Let's go and have a bite to eat together.
Surprisingly, she had agreed, but with the enthusiasm of someone agreeing to go to a dental appointment that they'd been putting off for years and years. She trotted by my side reluctantly. We walked down the long pavement lined with tall statuesque oak trees, not saying a word. I was shocked how aloof, indifferent, and disinterested she appeared towards me. Maybe this was a front she was putting on, because I had hurt her so much, which was likely the case. But I felt like a wilted, deflated flower in the meadow that had been trampled on by the grazing cows. But I deserved this. I knew I did. I had hurt the only girl I had ever loved. I felt like a monster, and Tara's reluctance to engage with me warmly was not only a cold slap to the face, but made me feel dreadfully rejected. It was like the tables had been turned, and Tara had dumped me, not the other way round, and it really hurt. It was like my ego had been ruptured, like a rubber tire that had exploded on the road. I was the one with egg on my face, and I knew it, and I didn't like wearing this look. I perceived that Tara wanted to eliminate me from her life like an ink splotch on a garment that she wanted to wash away, as if it had never ever existed. I was the one feeling as if Tara was moving on with her life, and I was this irritating bystander she was humouring, but she wanted nothing to do with me. I knew my brother's sagacious wisdom had come back to haunt me. Even if I wanted Tara back, I could sense that I had lost her for good. Tara was stubborn. She had a robust self-esteem on her that you did not try to crush, or knock any punches into it, or it would come back to bite you. She didn't suffer fools gladly, of which I was clearly one. We found a cosy private table in an Italian restaurant, renowned for its Italian homemade-style cooking, a place Tara and I visited regularly during happier times, which evoked pleasant memories, but not today. It overlooked a pretty street lined with honey locust trees, with people, many of them students, bustling down the sidewalks in groups, chatting away garrulously, and engaged in earnest conversations that involved giggles and snorting laughter. It felt as if the whole world was conspiring against me. I knew Tara loved Italian food, but she was not animated about being with me today. I felt as if I was the turd on her shoes, and she'd rather be anywhere else in the world than here with me. A waitress came forward with a menu, smiling warmly at us. "I'll have the margherita pizza and a Mountain Dew," said Tara. "I don't want to rush you, but if you could make the order quick, I'd really appreciate it."
"I'll have the same," I say to the waitress,
my appetite now evacuated from me. I can feel my feet are tapping the floor. I'm feeling quite anxious. Tara is just staring out of the window, watching the students ambling by. Some talking, others laughing, but she's not looking at me, and that is very upsetting.
"Tara, look, I'm sorry about everything that happened between us. I came up here to see you because I don't like the way things ended. I want to apologise for all that."
Tara doesn't look at me. She continues staring out of the window. It's infuriating. Why won't she look at me? "Jack, I don't know what you're doing here. I've moved on with my life, you can see that. I don't know why you're bothered to come back here. I have no interest in seeing you whatsoever, and I would truly appreciate it if you would leave me alone. You said what you wanted to say on the train, and that's that. We're over, so get that in your pipe and smoke it, will you?" Tara's words stung, as if thousands of hornets were pounding my skin with their stingers. It was clear she'd moved on with her life. She wanted to leave me out of it. I sensed she was no longer attracted to me, and held as much interest in me as a frog might hold in a pear drop. None whatsoever.
"Is there someone else?"
I ask her. "My love life is of no consequence to you," she chides. I now feel absolutely certain that she's dating that gentleman that opened the door to me, and I'm overwhelmed by an insane jealousy. I mean, how could she have moved on so quickly? Did I mean that little to her? I bite my lip and remain as stoic as I can, but it's hard to control my rumbling emotions.
"You're right. It's none of my business. I just wanted to make sure you're happy, that's all."
"I'm happy," pipes Tara, "and I'd be a hell of a lot happier if I never see you again, Jack." The waitress arrives with our pizzas and our drinks. We eat together in silence. without saying a word to each other. I was so grateful for the warm, stringy cheese and the sweet, sharp taste of the tomatoes. As the pizza cushioned the blows of my hurt, I now wanted Tara back. I really did. But I was way too proud to express my feelings, too bruised, too punctured, too squashed to be able to say anything to redeem the situation. I was like a wrestler who'd been so badly beaten up by my opponent, and I knew that there was no coming back from this. Tara had made her position clear. It was clearly over between us. I think even if I'd begged her, she'd have never ever taken me back. I knew that in my heart. I'd lost her forever, and the bitter taste of nausea rose up in the back of my throat. I knew I was defeated. I knew I had lost this. Tara's account. When I first met Jack, our romance blossomed. I fell for him hard. Our relationship had been magical from the very beginning. It was the stuff of what fairy tales were made of. In my mind's eye, I had met my Prince Charming. I had met the one. It might have been early in our lives, I mean. I was 21 years old. But did that actually matter? Of course it didn't. I had thought he felt exactly the same way about me. But when Jack told me that we should end our relationship, I was stumped by his mortifying words. I felt furiously angry with Jack. Rejected, spurned, spat out, abandoned, completely numb. Almost as if I was shell-shocked. It was as if my entire world had come crashing down on me. Jack may as well have beaten me down to a pulp, like the grapes in an old-fashioned wine press or a barrel, that are squashed and pulverized to make a fine wine, that in the process has cost me an indelible suffering. In 1 second my life had been joyful, happy. The boy I thought who loved me had spat me out like an old man's tobacco on the sidewalk. I don't think I cried then. I refused to. I bit my lip and held it together. I would be damned if I would give Jack the satisfaction of seeing he'd hurt me. I wanted nothing more to do with him, as he had treated me and our relationship with a shabby, contemptuous disregard, and dumping me before I even got onto the train was about as low as you could possibly get. I mean, who does that who has a heart? That was a low blow to the guts, and it hurt me hard. Since our breakup, Jack had written to me numerous letters. I had returned them back to him, refusing to open them. I didn't want to read all his excuses and explanations about why he had dumped me. I was so hurt, so broken-hearted. I wanted to move on with my life. I didn't need to meditate on my pain. When Jack arrived at my apartment, spontaneously out of the blue, I decided to act completely indifferent to him. I wanted to show him that I was as disinterested in him as a dog is in a bowl of lettuce. I wanted to act like I didn't give a toss about him, and that I'd got over him so easily, and that he no longer mattered in my life. And I knew it would hurt him, and that gave me a huge measure of satisfaction. I wanted to inflict on him the measure of rejection and hurt that he had injected in my life, and it worked. I could see his now forsaken ego was seriously perforated. He wasn't quite as self-assured or as cocky and confident as before. Little did he know how much I really loved him, and how difficult it would be for me to get over him. But he would never be privy to that secret knowledge, because hell over high water I would move on with my life. I would not allow Jack to drag me down, more than he already had. I had my suspicions that there must be someone else that Jack had obviously fallen for. I mean, why else would he have ended our relationship so abruptly? Back to Jack. I knew it was over with Tara. There wasn't even a glimmer of hope on the horizon. No chance of reconciliation whatsoever. She was out of my life for good. Yes, I wanted her back more than anything in the world. But it's like when you're at the horse races. You realise the horse you bet on didn't win, so you've lost. You have to accept the consequences. You can't sit back and cry that you got it so horribly wrong. You back the losing horse, and you have to accept your fate. It's never easy to lose in life, but it had to be that way with Tara. She was the one that had got away. I needed to forget about her, so I turned my swift attention onto Blaise, whose allure had become a lot less appealing. But she was a perfect distraction. But what the hell? I threw myself into this relationship, rather like a rock plunging into deep water. Blaise wasn't sweet like Tara. She was one hell of a messed up individual, whom introduced me to the world of drugs, weed, magic mushrooms and alcohol. And let's just say at first, the buzz I received from the cocktail of all these different mind-altering substances was very good indeed. But when you came crashing back to earth, it was a cruel blow. I missed Tara, and when I actually observed how screwed and goofed up Blaise was, I realised more and more what a complete imbecile I had been, to throw away the very best thing that had ever happened to me. It made me appreciate Tara all the more. Both my parents and brothers could not stand Blaise. My father took me to one side and said,
"Son, that girl's got very big problems. You don't want to hang around with a girl like that, surely."
My mother was equally as appalled by Blaise, probably more so, especially from the first moment she saw her. I'll never forget her expression. Her eyes grew round, her mouth dropped open. She looked like she wanted to say something, but she was completely tongue-tied. Blaise had these cute elf-like ears I found rather endearing. They stuck out of her long dark hair. She had a pixie face and thin willowy body, with arms covered with dragon tattoos, a nose ring in her nose, above her chin, in her tongue, and several ear piercings in her ears. Even the clothes she wore invited a disapproving appraisal from my mother, as she wore see-through net tops where you could see the pink bikini top beneath, leather jackets, exceedingly short black and red tartan skirts, and fishnet stockings with black combat boots. She wore dramatic makeup with a plethora of black eyeliner and bright red lipstick, so bright it almost glared. "I don't like her. I mean Blaise," my mother had told me on numerous occasions. "Your father's absolutely right. She's not normal, darling. She's got lots and lots of problems. You don't want to hang around with a girl like her. She'll influence you negatively."
"But that's why I like her. I'm sick of normal. I can't stand the status quo," I said rebelliously.
"Not for much longer, bro," said my brother Wesley. "You'll be begging for normal when you've dated her for long enough. Blaise looks like a punk rocker." My brother with Asperger's looks at me and says, "Your girlfriend's not normal, not normal." He shakes his head and says, "Where's Tara? She was nice." In truth, I think I was developing a late teenage rebellious spirit, as the more my parents and brothers protested, the more I wanted to rebel, and I continued to invite Blaise to stay with me at the farmhouse, where she was given the guest bedroom upstairs, and where my parents watched me like a hawk, never daring to let me out of their sight. I think one of the reasons they allowed me to have Blaise staying at the farmhouse in the first place was because they could keep a beady eye on the two of us, whereas if I was out with Blaise beyond the boundaries of our home, they would worry about me coming under the influences of Blaise's negative ascendancies that could lead me down a precarious, unwelcome path, where I might end up suffering from substance abuse issues later on. I think my parents hoped that I would grow out of this relationship, rather like an old pair of shoes that I would eagerly discard, once I'd worn them for long enough, and realise that they were rather shabby, unenduring, unflattering, and not a good fit. "I don't like both your parents," Blaise told me. "They're awful. They always look down on me, judge me. Your condescending, haughty mother keeps giving me the evil eye when she thinks I'm not looking. And your younger brother, he's the worst of all. He keeps wrinkling up his nose at me, with a disgusted revulsion on his face. He asked me why I wear nose and ear piercings, and what had possessed me to get all these dragon tattoos done over my arms. He says they're masculine. He told me that sailors wear tattoos like mine. He said I would regret it when I got older, as the ink is permanent. Don't mind Wesley. He's very conservative. You're far too wild for him. And my family, they don't understand a girl like you. You're idiosyncratic, unconventional, different, and my family doesn't do different very well. As for your brother Riley, the one with Asperger's, he's so rude. He told me I look really funny. Don't mind him. He's harmless enough. Well, I do mind. Isn't there anywhere we can go without your parents watching us all the time? I mean, I'm dying to smoke a joint, and I have some rum and coke in my duffel bag, waiting to be consumed. I want us to go and enjoy it.
I told you. We have to be cautious around my parents. We can't let them see us smoking pot. I'll wake you up tonight when the family's fast asleep, and we'll go in the wood grove to have a joint. How about that? Is that a deal?
Of course it's a deal. Have you ever seen me turn down a joint? Why does your bloody truck have to be at the goddamned auto mechanics this weekend? It's just my bloody luck, isn't it? If you ask me, your father sent it for servicing deliberately, so we would be stranded here together for the weekend, like two people lost on a desert island. It's not bloody fair. I even noticed your father smirking. He's very conniving. He's almost as bad as your mother. They both want to break us up, I know they do. If I had known that your truck would have been out of action this weekend, I would never have come here. I'm suffering withdrawals, and we're stuck here all weekend with your condemning parents and judgmental brother Wesley, who keeps shaking his head whenever he sees me. And your brother Riley, he's gormless. He stares at me with his mouth so wide open. He looks like he wants to catch flies with it.
I told you, Blaise. We'll go to the Woodgrove tonight. That's a promise. You'll get your hit. There's no way we can consume alcohol or smoke joints under my parents' roof. Do you understand that? My mother would do her nut. My father would have a coronary arrest. My parents are very straight-laced. Drugs and alcohol are not something that they can get their heads around. I don't think my parents have ever had a drug in their lives. And as for alcohol, they barely drink much of the stuff anyway, with the exception of the occasional glass of wine from time to time.
My mother is so much more easygoing than your parents. She'll do drugs and alcohol with me any day of the week.
You can't compare our parents, Blaise. You know you can't. Your mother is a crackhead. She's been in homeless shelters and drug rehabilitation centres all her life. Your father has helped her get out of this mess by paying for her to have all those treatments over and over again. But she keeps returning to the drugs like a dog to his vomit.
Don't say anything good about my dad, Blaise protests. He never wanted anything to do with me all my life.
It's probably not personal, Blaise, I say, taking her hand in mine to give it an encouraging squeeze. But she pulls it away from me. Her mouth is pinched, her eyes indignant, her body twitching from nervous anxiety.
You know nothing about my father, Jack. Nothing. He's a loser. So what if he paid my school and university fees? So what if he sent my mother to rehabilitation and pays for the roof over our heads? Those things are inconsequential. It's only money.
It's not inconsequential, Blaise. There are men out there that would not have paid for your mother to get so much help over the years. You have to admit he's been good to the both of you.
Financially, maybe. Blaise looks furious. You know nothing about us at all. Nothing, Jack. My dad abandoned me when I was very young. How do you think that made me feel? I haven't seen him for years. And if I did, I'd put a rifle through his head and blow his brains out. I've dreamt about that a lot. At this appalling revelation, I'm shocked.
You don't mean that, Blaise, I say. Your father just makes you angry. But your words, they mean nothing.
Don't you try me. If I had a chance, I would happily murder him. I decide that Blaise does not mean that. She's just heated about her father. And it's understandable, I suppose. I mean, the man was good to her financially, and still is. But he's never been there for her emotionally. The last time Blaise had seen her dad was when she was just 10 years old. He'd taken her to Disneyland. She hasn't seen him since, so it can't be easy. That night I'm awoken by my alarm clock. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I know the whole house is fast asleep. I cautiously tiptoe across the landing, which is lit by a nightlight, so that me and my brothers can easily access the toilets at night. My parents' bedroom is left slightly ajar, but I can hear my father's snores, so I feel reasonably assured that no one is awake. I quietly open Blaise's bedroom door. It creaks a little. To my amazement, Blaise is fully dressed, sitting at the edge of her bed, waiting impatiently for me, with a bottle of rum in her hands. Luckily, it looks like she's only taken a couple of swigs of the alcohol. Finally, she says, "I thought you weren't coming. I was about to have a smoke. I couldn't wait any longer. Look, my hands are trembling," she says, stretching her arm out in front of me. "You don't want to become like your mother," I whisper. "Remember, these drugs are recreational. You don't want to become addicted." "Shut up, Jack. Stop being so mean. I'm not becoming like my mother," she hisses adamantly. "Shh," I whisper. "You don't want to wake my family up. Remember, when we get out of here, you must be very, very quiet.
The floorboards can sometimes creak, and your combat boots might be noisy, so be careful. If we wake my parents up, there'll be no joint smoked in that forest. You get my drift?" Blaise nods. We both cautiously creep across the landing. Blade is carrying a small bag over her shoulders, containing all our quintessential supplies. We climb down the steps quietly. The house is so dead quiet you can hear a pin drop. Finally, we enter the kitchen, that although dark, the outside moonlight has flooded it in a soft luminescence that filters generously through the windows. We're both wearing headlamps on our heads in order to see our way clearly outside. I cautiously plunge the kitchen key into the lock, and the door opens, making a loud creaking sound. We close it behind us very carefully. I hide the key in one of my mother's flower pots. I have a rug rolled up under my arm, along with my dad's rifle. If he knew I had taken it without his permission, he would flip and have a cadenza, but what he doesn't know won't hurt him. It's better to be safe than sorry, in case there is a bear loitering around. As we leave my parents' kitchen, we are serenaded by the cheerful chorus of crickets and frogs, which gives me a sense that things are going to go very well tonight. When my parents both witnessed those strange light anomalies, they say that there were no animal sounds to be heard anywhere. No crickets, no frogs, no coyotes, nothing. It was deadly silent, apparently. But the moonlight tonight, accompanied by our headlamps, is generously cooperative to us, congenial and almost welcoming, making our trip through the swaying trees easier than we contemplated. I say swaying because there's a gentle breeze blowing. We amble across my father's manicured lawn, dappled with a moist dew. We move towards the rugged fringe of the trees that frame the outer perimeters of the woodgrove. I've been in this woodgrove hundreds and hundreds of times before, but this engaging, warm-hearted, mellow, shaded sanctuary, where I played cowboys and Indians a plethora of times as a young boy with my brother, is barely recognizable in the cruel, dithering shadows of the night, where a murky, indeterminate obscurity has buried the trees and their towering vertical impressions clandestinely under a cloaked, rather tenebrous blanket. The moonlight trickles through the canopy, but even her ethereal, magnanimous light does not accommodate the blacked-out paths that seem so hazy and obscure. It's a little like playing blind man's buff, as we trudge awkwardly through the trees, cracking the leaf litter beneath the soles of our rubber boots, while gusts of invigorating fresh air blow away the cobwebs of our tiredness. Now we're very much wide awake, almost as if we've jumped into an icy cold pool of water. I can sense Blaide's reticent, uneasy energy as her lips quiver and tremble, but I know the lure of having a smoke in the woodgrove far outweighs her rising level of angst. I'm also beginning to enjoy the thought of a smoke, but right now there is a menacing, bodeful ambience in the woodgrove that nudges me, whispering into my ears, "Get out! Get out! Get out!" But I willfully ignore those internal warning sirens. "I don't like it in here. It's so creepy." "Well, where else do you want to go?" "I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's spooky." "That's because it's dark," I assure my girlfriend. We stumble across leaf litter, twigs, and a plethora of loose stones that have lined the path precariously, and then finally we come to a clearing under a tree, and I roll out the blanket onto the dark earthen soil, flattening down some of the underlying grass. Before long, we're both rolling and smoking joints together. I feel incredibly relaxed and calm, exhilarated even. Blaise fills a couple of plastic cups with rum and coke, which we swig back ebulliently. Even the forest appears less sinister, and I'm getting acquainted with the obscure shapes that no longer appear to intimidate me. Blaise has significantly relaxed. Her trembling has eased, and has been eclipsed by an irrational, giggly laughter. She points at a fern, and we both collapse into laughter, as if it's the funniest thing we've ever seen. "It looks like an octopus with lacy tentacles. It's an effeminate squid." At that description, we both begin to crack up laughing again. After a while, the forest changes. I get the overwhelming feeling that something or someone is watching us. It's not a good feeling at all. I glance over at Blaise, who has stopped giggling, and her eyes are firmly pinned on a tree. I think I saw something. I really do. Something staring at us behind that tree over there. She starts to giggle again. We both literally roll over with laughter. We find anything funny. I'm literally laughing so much that my stomach is aching with pain, as my muscles are contracting and twinging so much. Then I see something that is clearly not as amused by our shenanigans as we are, and it's watching us. At first, for a moment, I think I'm seeing something that really can't be there. A hallucinatory effect of a very excellent marijuana that has the similar mind-altering qualities of a magic mushroom, so I think. I see a Bigfoot, I giggle. This stuff is really good. This is a good batch you bought. The creature moves towards us. The light of my headlamp cascades over his face. My humour dies as fast as the dying embers on a fire. It's bloody real, I hear Blaise say. I know she's right. What I'm seeing is not an optical illusion, nor is it a whimsical light teasing us and playing games with our imagination, nor is it the effect of a marijuana smoke. This creature is as real as you and me. Let's just say the calming, relaxing effects of the marijuana have made me less jumpy and nervous. In normal circumstances, my suppressed adrenaline surge would have bolted through my bloodstream with such a forceful vibration that I would have rocketed out of the forest as fast as a flying saucer. But not tonight. I'm so calm, so serene. When I see this creature, all 9 foot of his imposing form, I'm more bewildered and astonished than afraid. I stare at him with an open jaw, an eye so wide, because I can't believe what I'm beholding. In truth, I'm surprised they don't pop out of my head, like a couple of loose buttons on a teddy bear. The creature is so human-looking, with a rugged, handsome face, like an Indian warrior, as it has an indigenous quality to it. But he has a leathery dark skin, and a heavily wrinkled forehead. But he's built like a powerful army tank, or a polar bear. But his proportions are gargantuan. His arch-shaped head appears to be low-slung on his shoulders, and if there is a neck, I don't actually see one. The creature is incandescent, furious with us. His blazing yellow eyes are filled with indignation. He growls at us angrily, pulling back his lips to expose his human white teeth. And the next thing I know is he's grabbed me by my arm, flung me over his shoulders like a small sack of potatoes, because if at any time I have actually felt small, it was on the back of this creature, whose titanic shoulders could swallow me up for breakfast like a beluga whale. It happened so quickly, I didn't have time to react, or even to fight back. Suddenly the relaxed state of the weed from my system dissipates as fast as the steam from a kettle, almost as if my body has jumped into first gear and remembered my fear response. I'm filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. I perceive the doomful consequences of my predicament. My blood freezes over like an Alaskan river. I want to scream, but nothing dares come out of my mouth. I'm trying to scream, believe me, I really am, but the screams are all internal. They're not articulated audibly by my mouth. My teeth are chattering as if I'm freezing cold, and my entire body wobbles unsteadily. A light switches on in my head like a candle flame in a dark room. This creature is going to kill me. There is no plausible explanation for me being on the back of his shoulders like this, unless he wants to eat me for a light snack. I squeeze my eyes so tight. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. This is a dream. It's a dream. I'm going to wake up in any minute. But my sinking heart and the vacuous deep hollow in my gut warns me that this is no dream. I begin to fight back. I'm oscillating my arms backwards and forwards, but the creature pins me down on his shoulders so hard with one of his hands. I am helpless, powerless under his firm hold. His movements are agile, graceful, very smooth. The next thing I know is the creature has thrown me into the yard, feet away from my front door. He growls at me warningly, and then darts back into the forest, moving like the wind. I can see that Blaise is staggering towards me. She's running behind me, desperate to catch up with me. Finally, we're both standing in front of the kitchen door, trembling like a pair of blancmange jellies. I grab the key from the flower pot, my fingers quivering and shaking as I plunge the key into the lock. We both creep into the house, as quietly as we possibly can. Bloody hell! I thought you were a goner when he threw you on his shoulders like that. He was so angry. I thought he was taking you away to eat you. Tell me about it, I say. I thought I was dead. Is he still out there? Asks Blaise, looking at me nervously. All our stuff is in the woods. We can't go back to get it now. I'm too scared. I don't care about our bloody stuff. I'm never going back into that wood grove. That Bigfoot is bloody terrifying. I've never seen anything like him before. We both glance out of the kitchen window, and that's when we see these strange orbs of light, blue and yellow, dancing around the forest, moving between the trees. There is something unsettling, disturbing, ominously evil about them. I don't know what they are, but these are the orbs my parents described to me once. I don't know how we got to sleep that night, after that terrifying Bigfoot encounter, but we did, and when we went down to breakfast the following morning, both my parents were sitting around the table, with stern, sombre expressions on their faces that sent a chill down my spine. I'd never seen my parents look so earnest before. Let's just say, pleased they certainly were not. An anger seemed to hang around the table, like an ominous bad smell I would sooner avoid. Where are Riley and Wesley? I ask, as I sit down at the table and knock back a couple of swigs of fresh orange juice. I got your Uncle Joe to take them to town for ice creams. It's the two of you I want to talk to. My heart is flapping in my chest. Did my parents know what we got up to last night? Please, no, I beg inwardly. My father throws a familiar-looking packet of weed at me across the table. It lands on my side plate. Then he places a bottle of rum and coke by my side. Me and your mother found this lying on the front doorstep, he exclaimed, along with a bag and a rug. We know this is yours, son. What the hell are you doing with weed and alcohol in our house? It is in that revelatory moment I realised the Bigfoot had brought all our stuff back from the woodgrove and flung it at the front door, so that my parents now knew I was smoking marijuana, and that they would not take very well. To my amazement, Blaise leaps to my defence, spontaneously interceding. The cat most certainly has not got her tongue this morning. She seems charged with a great deal of indignant spunk. You shouldn't talk to your son like this. It's none of your business what he gets up to. He's old enough to make his own choices. If he wants to smoke weed, it's his business. And if he wants to drink rum and coke, it's his choice. You mollycoddle your son as if he's a baby. If I want your opinion about how I raise my son, young lady, I will ask you for it. But I'm not interested in what you think. Frankly, I don't give a damn. You're a bad influence on my son's life. I'll have you know that while he lives under our roof, our rules apply, and we do not accept drugs in this household. Now I would be most obliged, Blaise, if you would leave. You are no longer welcome in our home. Don't talk to my girlfriend like that, Dad. I'll talk to her how I like, son. This is my house. My father's account. My son Jack had always been such a promising young man. I was pleased of all his accomplishments. He was a bright, clever boy, and as a father I had always been proud of all my sons. But let's just say I was bothered about Jack's new girl in his life. Blaise was sweet enough, but I smelt trouble brewing on the horizon when she first arrived at our front door, on the first day we met her. I knew she would be a bad influence on Jack's life, and I wasn't wrong. How often do you hear the saying that you become like the company you keep? Sometimes men who've been incarcerated from a spate spent in prison become more qualified for a life of crime, after having been in the company of hardened criminals, so to speak. I was worried that some of Blaise's negative influences would rub off on my son, and not in a good way. I had found out from a few searching inquiries, unbeknown to my son Jack, who naturally never volunteered this vital information to me, because he didn't want me to know about it. But I discovered that Blaise's mother had been in drug and alcohol rehabilitation centres dozens of times, thanks to her father, who seemed willing to pay for his ex-wife to get the help she needed. But the moment she returned home, she sank back into her old ways, rather like a hamster returning to its exercise wheel for another spin. Blaise was an impressionable young girl who was hanging around a mother who was perpetually struggling with substance abuse.
I had my sneaky suspicions that her mother's lifestyle choices had inadvertently rubbed off on her. I mean, how could they not? I'll never forget my wife's reaction when she first met Blaise for the very first time. Jean, my wife, is super conservative. Let's just say when the young girl entered our home with nose rings bobbing out of her nose like rude safety pins, and a collection of ear piercings serenading the corners of her ears in a metallic intrusion, not to mention a piercing in her belly button that she was eager to show off under the skimpy top she wore. If that was not bad enough, her entire body was seemingly plastered and painted up with tattoos. Well, it seemed there was no spare skin left. I'm not adverse to tattoos, but I think the look was little too much for my wife to take on, especially when Blaise arrived at our house with bright pink hair. My wife had escaped into her bedroom. I found her sitting on the edge of the bed, blowing into a brown paper bag to calm herself down. "Look what the cat dragged in," she said to me. "I'm unable to cope with that punk rocker downstairs. What's happened to our son?"
"Look," I said, sitting down next to my wife on the bed, "I have no idea why our son is attracted to that girl. She's a very idiosyncratic woman. She's completely out there, and I think she's from a troubled background. He's possibly attracted to her rebellious spirit and unconventional ways. That's what I'm beginning to think."
"But why did he dump Tara for this Blaise girl? It's like our son has completely lost his marbles. I don't get it. Tara was so lovely."
"Don't get me wrong, sweetheart. I'm sure he regrets breaking up with Tara, although he'll never admit it. I think he went crawling back to her in the end, and she rejected him. Can't say I blame her. I mean, being dumped is not a good feeling, any way you look at it. And Tara, she's a proud young girl. So my guess is she pretty much moved on with her life. Wesley warned Jack, told him he was a complete idiot, but of course Jack refused to listen. Our son can be bull-headed and stubborn. I'm afraid he takes after me in that regard. Not always the best character trait."
"So there's no way that Tara can get back together with Jack, you don't think?"
"Unlikely, sweetheart. Very unlikely, I think."
"I'm just worried about this girl. She strikes me as so unstable. I'm quite sure she's taking drugs."
"Don't you worry about that," I assure my wife. "I'm quite sure Jack will soon learn from his many mistakes. It's the only way that he'll grow up. It's not for us to pass judgment on whom he dates. I imagine there are parents all over the world that may not like their sons or daughter-in-laws. It happens. One day it could potentially happen to us. We have 3 sons. One of our children may marry someone we don't particularly like, but we'll have to be cordial to them, as you must be to this girl, Blaise. You mustn't let Jack know how you feel about his girlfriend. It could bring out the rebellious spirit in him, drive him further into her arms, and we don't want him to do that. We need to make her feel welcome here, pretend that everything is rosy in the garden. I bet that Jack will soon lose interest in her when the shine wears off the shoes. Infatuation lasts only so long, but it has no enduring hold long term."
"I hope you're right, Timothy," my wife says to me. "I'll do my best to be cordial to the young girl." Believe me, my wife rarely tried to be kind to Blaise. But after she'd spent a weekend with us, and we found a picnic blanket, a bag, rum and coke, not to mention weed on the doorstep, rolled up joints in a plastic bag, we both lost it, and my wife and I pretty much told Blaise to get out of our home and to never come back. At first, things were rather tense in our household. I could tell Jack was infuriated with me and my wife for laying into his girlfriend. And then one day when I asked Jack to help me with some shelves I was putting up for his mother, he confided in me about Tara, and how he was still in love with her, and how he wished he could backpedal the bike to begin dating her all over again.
Dad, I really blew it. I was such an idiot. Wesley was absolutely right. Why does my younger brother have to show me up all the time? Why does he always have to be so right about everything? I threw away the best thing that happened to me, and when I went to Atlanta to see her, she made it clear she'd moved on with her life, wanted nothing more to do with me. Dad, she made me feel as if I'd been nothing to her. It really hurt. Well, son, that's why you have to be careful about the choices you make in life, I tell him, Don't be too quick to run after something that may entice you, but in reality might not have any substance behind it. You have a good thing in Tara there, but you threw it out with the bathwater, and frankly you hurt the poor girl. I'm not surprised she rebuffed you. She must have been terribly hurt. Jack sighs. I've made lots of bosh-ups in my life. He pauses for a moment, and then asks me, Dad, do you believe in Bigfoot? I was startled by his question. As it happens, son, I do, I say. At that, Jack looks at me incredulously, as if he can't believe what I've just said. You never said, Dad. It's not the sort of thing I care to discuss, I say. You know those light anomalies you and Mum saw in the woods? You mean the light orbs? That's right, he says. What about them? What do you want to know, son? Well, what are they, Dad? They're not good, son. That is why me and your mother have always warned you boys never to go into the woodgrove at night. Those things, whatever they are evil, most especially the blue ones. Jack then tells me the story about the dangerous Bigfoot he'd encountered in the woodgrove with Blaise, and the strange light anomalies that they'd seen from the kitchen window, after he and Blaise had returned to the house. It sounds to me, son, as if the Bigfoot was protecting you. He didn't want you anywhere near those light anomalies. That is when I told my son my own personal story. Timothy's childhood story. I grew up in this farmhouse, where I'm raising my own sons as a young boy. One night when I was about 10 years old, I woke up in the bedroom I shared with my brother Noah, and tiptoed down the sweeping staircase. I'd been eating lots of salted peanuts during the day, and woke up with an insatiable thirst. My throat was dry. I was gagging for some water to drink, but milk would be so much more preferable, and I could hear the milk carton calling my name from the downstairs refrigerator. I padded quietly down the staircase in my dressing gown and slippers. It was early spring, so there was a reasonable chill in the air. I didn't bother to put on the kitchen light, but navigated my way easily to the refrigerator. Our kitchen possessed large windows that overlooked the backyard and the woodgrove. There was a soft moonlight that danced through the kitchen, making it easy to see very clearly. I opened the refrigerator door and grabbed a carton of milk, and I began to drink it straight from the box. My mother would have had a heart attack seeing me drinking milk this way, but what she didn't know would never hurt her. For some reason, as I was drinking the milk, I noticed some strange orbs of light that seemed to be rolling through the woodgrove and gliding through the trees. It was very peculiar. I remember thinking, what the hell is that? I quickly raced up the staircase to drag my unwilling brother Noah out of his bed to observe the strange spectacle that I'd seen. Let's just say he wasn't enamoured to be woken up, and grumbled bitterly under his breath, but nevertheless he reluctantly agreed to follow me down the staircase. What's this about, bro? Can't you see I'm tired? When I showed him the light anomalies through the window, his sleepiness dissipated, and he pipes, What are those strange balls of light doing? Moving between the trees? What are they? He looks bewildered about what he's perceiving. That's what I'd like to know, I say. Should we go and check it out? I ask him. We both decided that checking the anomaly out was a good idea, and we crept upstairs, taking care not to wake up the parents. I quickly grabbed my sneakers, threw on a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt, as well as a windbreaker. I opened the kitchen door cautiously, and armed with our flashlights, we ventured towards the woodgrove that fringes the borders of our property. We were greeted by a bracing, cool blast of icy air as we ventured out of the house, ambling across the mown yard towards the fringe of trees, which were jiggling against the gentle nudges of the wind. We could see the light orbs moving through the trees. They were yellow and blue ones. They seemed intelligent, and I sensed these lights were watching us, and the feeling was bodeful, airy, unsettling. As we entered the forest, the energy seemed capricious and incredibly hostile. It felt as if we weren't welcome in this place, and I got the overwhelming sense that there were eyes everywhere, boring into us, and those eyes were not kind. It was like chills were running down my spine. I had played in this woodgrove numerous times before during the day, but never had the woodgrove felt so hauntingly airy, so bodeful, so oppressive, so claustrophobic. I think we should get out of here, I told my brother. Something doesn't feel right. Something feels terribly wrong. Those orbs, they're intelligent, but it's like they're watching us, and they're horrible. There's something horrible about them. Before my brother had an opportunity to express his own reservations, a blue orb actually moves directly towards us, and then it bounces onto my brother's shoulders. And the next thing I know, my brother begins to convulse, as if his whole body has been charged with an electric current. He's looking at me with eyes filled with terror and an expression of, "What's happening to me? What's happening to me?" I notice smoke rising from my brother's shoulders. It's like he's being electrocuted by this blue orb. And there's that electric sparking sound sizzling through him, while his body jolts and trembles under this powerful surge of energy. I know in that moment that my brother's body is going to be fried and go up in smoke, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. I can only watch in helplessness. I am filled with such trepidation, such terror, such absolute devastation. But I know better than to touch my brother. Whatever this blue orb is, it epitomizes all that is evil at its most raw and unrestrained. I want to say something, but my mouth opens and closes on its own. I stare at my brother, see another blue orb moving eagerly towards me, and I hastily zigzag out of its way before it gets me. Then something quite extraordinary happens, something that I cannot explain, as it seems so outer-worldly. A tall, humongous creature arrives so fortuitously on the scene and dives towards my brother, like a desperate mother rescuing her child from drowning in the lake. I see this huge humanoid creature, covered with long flowing dark hair, bending over my brother, grunting something in a strange language that I don't understand, nor can I comprehend. The creature throws my brother down on the ground and begins patting my brother's back frantically, like someone trying to swat the flames from a person who's been caught on fire. I am confounded as the blue orb of light that incapacitated my brother comes bobbing out of his body very reluctantly. But the light is smoking, and there is a stench of burnt rubber that fills the forest. But the orb, which is blistered with what looks like flames of yellow light, literally flies away. My brother's eyes are rolling in the back of his head. He looks disorientated. As I'm watching this, I realize whatever this enormous creature is, he's just saved my brother's life, and possibly mine as well. It was like that blue light that had harmed my brother was forced to leave, and the one that had been intent on harming me had quickly scurried away, like a frightened rabbit darting back to its burrow. The creature is standing beside my brother, patting him all over, and all this while white smoke rises out of his body and dissipates like steam from a kettle until it disappears. The creature stands up and looks at us intently. I'm wondering at this point of time if he's an angel that has been sent by God to rescue us. Our Sunday school teacher had been talking about angels in Sunday school only the previous Sunday, and had told us how God sent them to rescue his children. But I'd never heard of hairy angels before. This creature is absolutely Goliath-like in size. I mean, he's about 9 foot tall, 4 foot wide across the shoulders, with a human-like face. But angels are supposed to be very big. Some are the size of skyscrapers, I'd been told. He must be an angel, I decide. I look directly at the creature and say to him, "Are you an angel sent from God to help us?" I hear the words answered in my head. "Me and my kind are the gatekeepers of the forest." Even though the creature had spoken to me telepathically at 10 years old, I am very accepting of this idiosyncratic line of communication, without being remotely perplexed about it. It seemed as natural to me as breathing, communicating like this. "The blue light! What's the blue light that tried to attack my brother?" "They're evil. They want to kill, steal, and destroy. Don't go near the blue lights again." My brother is still so out of sorts that the creature picks him up in his arms, holding him like a baby, and beckons for me to follow him. I don't hesitate. He glides through the forest with me comfortably at his side, and we move towards my house. He lowers my brother on the ground, placing him on the kitchen doorstep in a seated position. Thank you for saving us," I say to the creature. "May the good Lord be with you," he says in my head. "Stay with your brother until he wakes up." I watch as the creature glides away into the woods. I'm surprised he doesn't have any wings, but he is huge, with beautiful yellow eyes, and I feel privileged to have met one of God's angels.
My brother's just sitting there. His heart is beating, but it's like he's under some kind of trance. I tried to talk to him, but he fails to respond, staring vacantly into space. I'm mortified to discover he stinks of rubber and smoke, and there are holes everywhere, which appear to have been singed by fire, and even his shoes look like they've been melted like wax. I'm delighted to say that my brother made a full recovery, but has absolutely no memory of the event. I was to learn later that the idiosyncratic creature I encountered that night is a Bigfoot, and I'm in no doubt he saved our lives. Back to Jack. When I hear my father's extraordinary story, I'm now convinced that the Bigfoot me and Blaise encountered was angry with us only because he wanted to scare us away from those light anomalies. He didn't want us anywhere near them. It now makes perfect sense to me. So sometimes if a Bigfoot is trying to get you out of the woods, it may be because he's trying to save your life. 6 years later, I'm walking down a street in Charleston, Virginia. I'd been on a course there with my company. I'm standing in a coffee shop ordering myself a cup of coffee to go. I glance over at one of the occupied tables. A young woman is typing in her computer, but it's her long Titian colouring that gets my attention. Can it be? No way. But I had to find out, so I grab some bags of sugar and deliberately drop one near her feet. Sorry, I say, reaching down to retrieve it. I find myself looking up into Tara's blue eyes. Oh my God, it was her. We stare at each other for a moment. Jack, she says. Tara, I say. I pull up a chair to sit opposite her. I decide I don't give a damn anymore if she rejects me, but today I'm going to wear my heart on my sleeve. Tara, I say to her, if I have any regrets in my life, it's losing you. You're the only girl I've ever loved. She stares at me. But why did you dump me on that train? Because, Tara, you were the road that was safe, beautiful, reliable, charming. I wanted to try a different journey. I wanted to walk down the rocky, crooked road, badly paved, but it led to a dead end. It was a treacherous road. She looked at me and smiled. Ah, you're mad, Jack. You really are. Why would anybody want to take a road like that? You fancy yourself as some kind of a daredevil, don't you? Something like that, I say. But I'm certainly a fool. A very big fool. I'm delighted to tell you that me and Tara are happily married now, with 2 children. The last I heard about Blaise is that she's been in 3 different rehabilitation centres for substance abuse. So sometimes taking the daredevil choice in life will come back to bite you. So there you are. That's my story.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners. Growing up, I grew up in a foster home with a younger brother, Antonio. We weren't related by blood, as Antonio had Navajo roots, which were clearly seen in his outer appearance. He had nut-brown skin, dark hair, dark eyes, and a heart on him of pure gold. I loved him a lot. He was my best friend, and as far as I was concerned, he was my blood brother in every single regard. I'm not sure how he ended up becoming fostered, as the story regarding his birth was rather blurry and vague. But I gather he was found on the doorstep of the convent in a basket with a note saying, "He's half Navajo. Please take care of him. I've named him Antonio. Tell him I love him." I, on the other hand, had been born in New York to a troubled 16-year-old girl dealing with substance abuse who had handed me over to the nuns at the convent as she couldn't cope with raising me herself. I had been informed that it had almost been a wrestling match to hand me over to the nuns, but after they had consoled her, talked to her at great length, she had decided that handing me over to them was the best thing she could do. On hearing the story from my foster mother, I had empathy with my 16-year-old mother, whom I'd never met. When I was 18 years old, I commiserated with her, as there is no way I could cope with raising a kid so young myself. My foster mother, Peggy Lou, told me that the nuns had said to my 16-year-old mother, "You can't look after yourself. How can you look after this kid? Love sometimes means great personal sacrifice. You need to think of your child's future." She had looked up at the nuns through eyes brimming with tears and said, "You're right. I can't look after him. I'm too young. I'm all over the place. Please promise me you won't change his name. You must call him Sebastian." To which the nuns had agreed.
Growing up, my name was shortened to Seb. As far as I was concerned, Sebastian was a mouthful. My foster parents weren't exactly wealthy people. I think they appreciated that the state gave them money for our charge. But that was not the reason they were raising us. They loved children, and my mother couldn't have any of her own. She described herself to me as barren, like Hannah in the Bible. But she was a Hannah whose voice God had failed to hear. I'm not exactly sure why she couldn't have children, but there are some things you don't ask a woman, even if she is your foster mother. I figured if she wanted to tell me why she was barren, she would confide in me when she chose, but she never did. The great thing about the convent was that they did a thorough check-up on all the homes where the orphan children would be fostered, or better still, adopted. The nuns wanted to assure themselves that we would be brought up in a secure, safe, very loving environment. I gathered that my 2 foster parents went through grueling, extensive interviews with the Mother Superior, whom spontaneously made impromptu visits over the years to our home, never informing us when she was popping over for a visit. Sometimes another nun would come in the Mother Superior's place. She would take us always to one side and interview us about our home life with questions like, "Do you like your mummy, Seb? And when your mummy gets cross, does she ever hit you?" The Mother Superior and the nuns at the convent were so thorough in checking that we were having happy lives, that we were safe and secure. And that's a hell of a lot better than social services, in my opinion, because they left no stone unturned. In a heartbeat, they would have whisked me and my brother away from my parents' home if there was the slightest inkling of abuse in the air. My foster mum told me that the nuns at the convent were not happy about her not being married to my foster father, but they understand when my mother explained she didn't believe in a piece of paper or in the institution of marriage itself, as the nun was rather concerned that my parents weren't married. My mother explained that she felt that you didn't need to be married to be committed as a parent or a wife. I think the Mother Superior realised my foster mother was troubled by the subject of marriage, as her own mother had been married over 5 times, and my foster mother thought marriage was actually jinxed. I think the Mother Superior liked my mother so very much that she overlooked these kind of issues that my mother had with paperwork. My mother was very afraid that the nuns would think that she and my father weren't wealthy enough to foster us, but nothing could have been further from the truth. My mother was to discover that a nun is not easily put off by a lack of money, as they have to take a vow of poverty themselves. The Mother Superior sagaciously told my mother that as long as you have a roof over your kids' heads, enough money to provide for food, medicine, clothes and schooling, then you're absolutely fine. My mother was informed that if she ran out of money for our quintessential needs, to contact them at once, as their charitable fund would help cover costs for us. But it's not about the money, it's about love. That's all that matters, she was told. I don't really have any memories of the convent, as I was very young when my foster mother brought me home, although I do recollect the Mother Superior saying, "Seth, this is your new foster mummy." I didn't know what foster meant, and I never cared to ask. I do remember the Mother Superior coming to visit us from time to time, asking us the strangest questions. She would close the bedroom door behind me and give me my present, that I would tear open so excitedly, as if all my Christmases had come at once, and as if the Mother Superior herself was some kind of magical fairy godmother, answering the wishes of a young boy. She always brought us the most amazing presents. I remember once being given a train set from the Mother Superior, and another time me and my brother were both given fabulous bicycles. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. "So tell me, Seth," she would say, "are you happy in this house with your mummy and daddy? Are they nice to you? Do they ever fight? Do they drink alcohol? Do they ever get cross with you?" I would show her pictures I drew of my family, with a big smiley sun shining down on our home. The Mother Superior would leave, feeling fully satisfied that we were happy children, and she wasn't wrong. We absolutely were. Suffice to say, even though my mother and dad never got married, nor did they legally adopt us, but let's just say they'll always be mum and dad to us. By all accounts, most people who met them assumed they were naturally married, and we were their birth children. Me and my brother never corrected them. If they thought it was strange that my brother looked so different to me, they never asked any awkward questions, as oddities aren't altogether uncommon in families. I do count my blessings that I was raised in such a loving environment. I know I was very blessed. Ostensibly, from a young age, my brother Antonio would seem to know things sometimes before they actually happened. He'd say, "The Mother Superior's visiting us today." And sure enough, he'd be right about her fortuitous visit. He even told my mother that she was going to fall on the patio outside and break her wrist. "Maybe if you're careful, it won't happen to you," he told her. My mother had said to him affectionately, "What are you like, Antonio? You do dream up some crazy stuff, don't you?" But as sure as eggs is eggs, my mother slipped down the patio steps one icy winter morning and reached down to support herself in the fall. Her wrist broke and just snapped. I remember me and Antonio screamed when she came into the house with her hand virtually dangling off her wrist. It was the most grotesque sight we'd ever seen. I remember she was in agonizing pain and had an operation to pin her wrist together. But what befuddled me the most was how could my brother Antonio have known she would break her wrist like this? My mother decided that Antonio's Navajo roots gave him the gift of a second sight. Whether this was true or not, I certainly don't know. But my brother claimed to be visited by an eagle in his dreams regularly, and the eagle would tell him things that came true, which I thought was incredibly special. I envied him for having a totem animal visiting him in his dreams. For most of my dreams I just never remembered, and when I did they were nonsensical and irrational. Such a bummer. Growing up, my parents struggled financially, but we were surrounded by a plethora of love that we couldn't fault. My mother was the most nurturing spirit. She would read to us every night, while my father was a diligently hard-working character who sometimes worked 3 jobs to provide for us, so he wanted for nothing. We had a great life. We lived in a small rural American town in Idaho called Stanley. It's referred to as the crown jewel of mountain towns, with its prepossessing dramatic alpine scenery, and surrounded by very imposing snow-capped mountains. Our house was a long, symmetrical white building that had been sectioned off into several other homes, so the front of the house boasted 5 front doors, each door belonging to a different semi-detached house. We lived at number 53. By all accounts it was rather poky and small, but it suited our needs. There was a paper-thin dividing wall between our home and the next-door neighbours on either side of us, so uncomfortably close, in fact, that we pretty much knew the intimate details of their lives. The neighbours on our right-hand side were always screaming and shouting obscenities at each other. We picked up that it was the woman that goaded our husband with her cutting words. She was so nasty to him. So me and my brother learnt early on in life that women can be very abusive in relationships. It's not just men. I'd seen the young lady in question before on numerous occasions. She looked like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. She was so pretty, so slight, with long blonde hair that tousled on her shoulders in pretty waves. It seemed hard to fathom that a seemingly demure young lady, who had an angelic face, could be so hostile, cruel, vindictive, under her deceptively attractive veneer. It rather reminds me of an ornate wallpaper covering up the ugliest wall, to hide up all its faults, its underlying pits and cracks. When my mother used to tell me never to judge a book by its cover, I now knew what she meant. One day me and my brother watched our neighbour leaving her house. We were on our bicycles, staring at her curiously. She turned and spat some spittle on the ground, glaring at us with wide blue eyes, and piped maliciously, "What are you staring at, you gormless little brats? Get the hell out of my way!" From that moment on I called her the Ice Queen, although I found out her name was Prissy, which I think is short for Priscilla, although I can't be sure. My brother called her Prickly Prissy, which I thought was most apt. When our neighbours were having an explosive spat that caused the walls to literally shake and wobble under the vibration of Prissy's high-pitched screams, we would pin our ears inquisitively to the wall and eavesdrop on these highly entertaining but cruel altercations. I began to feel very sorry for Priscilla's husband Larry. I couldn't fathom why he did not up and leave, for his own self-respect, but he never did. Instead, he put up with her insane abuse and became her quintessential punching bag. I was absolutely appalled by the viciousness of the woman's words. In truth, they were so vile, I cannot actually repeat them on paper. It would make me physically squirm. and soil this page with their odorous foulness. Let's just say her words often related to the human anatomy, and were fierce, cutting, and highly unsavoury. Occasionally, Prissy's bullied husband would march out of the house, screaming belligerently at his wife, "I'm getting out of here, you bloody bitch! I wish to God I'd never married you." I'd watch him thunder furiously towards his car, his head shaking. He'd bounce onto the front seat, slam the door behind him with a loud bang, press the accelerator down so hard that the rubber tires would actually shriek under the burden of his wrath. He would drive away at a breakneck speed, but I didn't blame him. Then, dejected and forsaken, he would finally return home late at night, staggering up the driveway in an inebriated, intoxicated state, slurring on his words, unable to walk steadily in a straight line. I could always hear the wife hurling and spitting abuse at him when he did return home. "You're such a bloody drunken loser!" she'd shout. One day he was so plastered, his legs crumbled beneath him. He passed out outside his front door, in a huge mangled heap, like a large sack of dirty washing. My brother alerted my mother to the problem, as we were woken up to our neighbour crashing around like an elephant in a china shop. My parents brought the drunk-blooded man into our house to sleep on our couch. If he'd been left out there in those freezing conditions, he could have succumbed to hypothermia. But I don't think his hard, toffee-nosed wife would have given a toss. I think the only thing that she loved was herself. My mother covered our neighbour with blankets, and the next morning I remember saying to him, "Sir, you don't have to stay with your wife, you know. She's really horrible to you." He had looked at me bemused and said, "You're right, son. I don't have to stay with her, do I? God knows why I put up with her. I'm my own worst enemy, and my wife's favourite punching bag." I would ponder this over many years, and wonder why some people stayed in such unhappy relationships. My mother told our neighbour Larry that if he needed to stay over at our house when his wife kicked him out, he was more than welcome. He soon became a regular fixture and fitting on our couch in our living room. I think he preferred to stay over with us than face the wrath of his condescending, foul-mouthed, capricious wife. Sometimes I'd open our door for him and lead him to our sofa. He was a gentle, kind character, an unassuming soul, who didn't deserve the unkind abuse he was subjected to. I knew he medicated the pain of his marriage with alcohol. It would have been so much easier if he'd just walked away, and I wish he had. The odious woman on the surface looked so benign, but underneath the door she was anything but, rather like a beautiful tree frog that is toxically poisonous. Over the years, my mother succeeded in making a cheerful, mellow home for us. She bought homely furniture from second-hand shops, thrift stores, garage sales, and flea markets, and although it was an eclectic mix of mismatches, it worked. Our house was small, cosy, snug, warm, and comfy, and the spitting, cracking fire we had in the living room on cold winter nights was what dreams are made of. We would sit around the fire, roasting marshmallows. My father would tell us so many fabulous stories. He was an amazing storyteller, and we would much prefer listening to one of his stories than watching the box any day of the week. My brother and I would make money by doing odd jobs for people around town. We didn't want to ask my dad for money, as he worked his butt off for us in the first place, and would easily and selflessly have given us the shirt off his back if I'd even asked him for it. He was the kindest, most gentle man I have ever known. He was tall and big, reminding me of a lovable teddy bear. He gave you the best, biggest, barest hugs. My brother and I over the years would engage in any job going, and would paint yard fences, mow lawns, clean out people's fish tanks. There was no job too big or too small for us, and we had saved up a considerable amount of money, and we were going to put it towards buying our first car that we intended to share. One day I decided to take a job working for a fast food outlet that paid double if you worked night shifts. I was 18 years old at the time and could drive to work in my dad's car. My mother was not too keen on me taking the job over the late hours of the night, but I told her it would be absolutely fine. Professedly, I'd be the only one working on night duty, and there were very few customers at that ungodly time of the night. I could busy myself by watching Netflix on my cell, or listening to stories. My mother reluctantly, obsequiously agreed when my father told her to stop mollycoddling me.
Seb wants a bit of independence, sweetheart. I know you mean well. You're a good woman. But he's a grown man. And if he wants to work night shift, let him, for goodness sake.
I still don't like our son being out there all night. You hear stories, horrible stories, don't you?
For goodness sake, sweetheart. You've been watching far too many horror movies. Lots of people all over America work night shift, and they don't come to any harm. I'm sure our son will be just fine.
But some of them do come to harm, my mother had insisted. My brother Antonio also tried to put me off working at the drive-thru, claiming he sensed something untoward would happen at the place for me, and he kept getting visions of a big black creature. I didn't appreciate my brother's foreboding words, but they were far too vague to take seriously. He wasn't warning me that I'd break my wrist or something. He was just saying he sensed something off. Perhaps he was trying to scare me off the job, as he sensed my mother's discomposure, and he had her back. He was a kind lad like that. I had been working at the drive-thru for over 6 months, without anything inopportune ever happening. The night shifts were drudgingly quiet, sometimes so deathly still that all I could hear was my own breath, which could feel quite ominous at times. I was to find there was barely a soul around at this time of night, as who in their right mind wants to eat a burger at an insanely late hour of the night? Granted, you get a few people, but they are few and far between. The manager only kept the place open for franchise obligations and quotas to do with opening hours, I think. Let's just say he encouraged me to work the late shift, but if I'm being given double pay for doing absolutely nothing, I'm hardly going to look a gift horse in the mouth, am I? Every night the chef would efficiently cook over a dozen burgers that were neatly tucked away in their cardboard boxes on the steaming hot tray, looking like lonely, dishevelled, shrunken, large black mushrooms that had seen better days, and were as fresh as the lettuce that has been sitting in the refrigerator for days on end. I knew how to use the deep fryer when customers ordered chips, and frankly, they were the only things worth ordering at this late time of the night. On this particular evening, I think I only had served about 2 people. I took their orders at the ordering booth, and then served them their burgers at the hatch, as I was all on my own. I then went to sit down close to the booth to entertain myself with some YouTube videos. In a trice, I hear the sound of screeching car tyres rolling down the driveway, so I expeditiously prepare myself for taking an order and walk over to the ordering hatch, but no one is there. I had definitely heard a car approaching. I knew I wasn't mistaken. So I curiously walk over to the dining area of the fast food chain, which is an eating area during the day for hungry customers, and officiously composed of tables and chairs, like you would see in a regular fast food outlet like McDonald's or Burger King. The floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlook the car park, the interstate on one side, and a woodgrove on the other. The outside lights of the fast food chain are on, and there's a flashing light with the words drive-thru open. I audibly recoil as I see a truck parked precariously in the middle of the driveway at a haphazard diagonal, an atypical angle it seems, with its lights on and the driver's side door wide open. What the hell, I think? What is the driver doing parked in the middle of the customer parking bay with his door wide open like that? It occurs to me he must be in trouble. Perhaps he needs my help. My heart is thundering in my chest because something feels really off about this. But I can't sit back and do nothing, can I? If there's a man in his truck, he might be in need of help. I can't abandon him like this, supposing he's having a heart attack and needs emergency help. It's at times like this that my job working alone on the night shift feels a lot less favourable to me. And right now, I'd rather be anywhere else in the world than right here. I glance at the clock. It registers 3 o'clock in the morning. I hurriedly grab the torch that I bring to work as a matter of routine. It is unnaturally nebulously quiet. There's an almost full moon, a scattering of silvery stars. But despite their generous luminescence, the uncongenial hostility of the twilight seems to be cloaking and surreptitiously veiling a cloying clandestine evil that is loitering beneath the dark shadows, hiding within its murky, bodeful depths. In a trice, a menacious sense of being watched with blazing, burning eyes that burn their firing embers into me causes my legs to crumble beneath me like a table that has lost its legs. Of course, I'm being silly, I tell myself. Hold it together, for goodness sake. Stop being such a wet blanket, I tell myself sternly. Hello, sir, I call out as I see a man's figure slumped against the seat. His eyes stare vacantly ahead of him. Hello, sir. Are you all right? I call, moving towards his driver's seat door, which is wide open, and peering inside at the motionless man, whom is unresponsive. I'm greeted to the strong scent of whiskey. The man's been drinking, I think. I guess he must have passed out. Hello, sir. Are you all right? Sir? Sir, are you all right? Sir? Then I recognise the face. It's our next-door neighbour, Larry Beckenridge, who often sleeps on our couch at home. He must have come to the fast food joint for a burger to satisfy an attack of the munchies. I know Mr. Beckenridge has a history of passing out when he's drunk. I shake his body furiously hard, but it slumps over, falling to the ground, and I realise to my horror, he's dead. I feel for a pulse. There's nothing. Mr. Beckenridge! Mr. Beckenridge! Wake up! Wake up! Are you all right? I slap his face. Mr. Beckenridge! Are you all right? But I know my efforts to revive a dead corpse are futile and pointless. I flinch in horror. What the hell, I think. Unable to articulate any thoughts, I'm filled with a discomposing terror. And that's when I hear a loud, guttural growl that reverberates right through my chest. I feel danger before I even see it, and every hair on the back of my neck is standing up on edge. And that is when I see him. He's standing 15 feet away from the truck, a ginormous creature, under the intrusive blazing light of the moon that has not shrouded this creature. I see him in explicit, angry detail. The light is not kind in its divulgence. I have already seen too much. Far, far too much. More than I can bear to actually see. My instincts knows that this is a perilous danger, and she has invited herself to engage with me tonight, and I have no interest in parting with her whatsoever. But it would seem she has other ideas. The creature is an abhorrent being, like something that has been vomited or purged into our world from the dominion of hell itself, or thrust into our reality through Satan worshippers or people indulging in an ignorant curiosity by degenerately playing with Ouija boards. It's the kind of enigmatic creature that should not exist. It embodies evil in its full elucidation. This repellent being is 7 foot tall, covered with thick, manky, tangled hair that is covered in grass, twigs, and thorny briars. His body is built like a man, but highly masculine, with a very narrow waist, ripped torso, where the muscle definition is so pronounced it almost juts out of the skin, like the angry, jagged rocks on the earthen floor of a forest. The creature has long arms, very long, hands and feet that are human-like, but it has claws instead of nails. But his huge head is like that of a wolf. In that moment, I know I'm as good as dead. The creature is actually laughing at my terror, as if feeding off it, as if basking in my fear, like we might relax in a warm bubble bath at home. I tremble, vamoose, and shrink back as he pulls back his muzzle to expose what appears to be 2 rows of sharp, dagger-like canine teeth. His mouth is drooling, and I get the macabre impression that it's me he's salivating over. It's me he wants to eat. I scream shrilly, but no one is here to come to my aid, for the night is devoid of living souls, and my screams are lost in the dark night, blending in seamlessly with the distant howls of coyotes. I am all alone in the car lot, at the mercy of this god-awful creature. I instinctively push Mr. Beckenridge's deceased body onto the ground, where it lands in a floppy heap on the asphalt parking bay. I know it's cruel to leave him there, but he's dead, and I need to get the hell out of this place or I'll be joining him. I plunge my body onto the driver's seat as fast as I can, slamming the door behind me, locking myself into the car, trembling violently. I turn on the ignition.
my hands shaking and trembling so much that my movements are clumsy. I finally push my feet down heavily on the gas pedal. The truck almost shrieks as I drive away, with the creature jogging right behind me. I'm so frightened that my struggled breathing is laboured, heavy, burdened, cumbersome. My heart thunders violently in my chest. I think I'm going to have a heart attack. Why won't the bloody creature get the hell away from me? What's it doing following me like this? For a long time I drive around in circles, with the creature following me every step of the way. I hear growls and howls and screams behind me.
I can't possibly drive home, lest this insanely evil creature follows me back. I don't want it to know where I live. The creature bolts to the driver's side of the window. He's running right next to me as I drive, laughing in at me, leering at me through his blazing yellow eyes, with the spittle drooling out of his mouth. I'm filled with a vacuous, hollow feeling, as if I'm travelling down a long, long black tunnel, devoid of any light, where everything in that tunnel is snarling, hissing and growling at me. After a while, the creature just disappears. Where has he gone? 1 minute he was there, but now he's nowhere to be seen. I'm so relieved. I drive home as quickly as I can, in my truck that doesn't actually belong to me. I'm so discomposed that even when I arrive in the parking bay of our premises, I am so incapacitated I can barely get out of the truck. It's like my body has frozen up into a lump of hardened cement that isn't going anywhere, so I'm pretty much glued to my seat, like a stationary plastic figure in a toy car. Finally, as I reflect over what has transpired, I realise I have to tell Prissy that her husband is dead, and she is the last person I want to see right now. In hindsight, I should have overlooked her and called the police at once. I don't actually know what I was thinking. I knock on the door. I can hear Prissy's grumbling voice coming to the door. "All right, I'm coming. Why the hell didn't you take your bloody key with you, you complete, total and utter moron?" The door is open, and Prissy is standing in the doorway. She's wearing a burgundy silk pair of pyjamas. She looks as disgruntled as a belligerent white rhino that's in the throes of a frenzied attack. But she's not scaring me. Not after having encountered that monstrous beast. It makes her appear almost like a pussycat. Prissy, on seeing me at the doorway, scowls. "Why, it's the brat from next door! How lovely!" she says sarcastically. "To what do I owe this unexpected honour? At 4 bloody o'clock in the morning? Are you kidding me? What do you want?" she snaps. "What do you mean by bothering me at this time of the morning?" "It's about your husband. If you've come to tell me he's lying dead in a ditch at the side of the road, see if I care. I don't give a bloody damn. Now leave me alone. I need my beauty sleep. Get out, will you?" I put my foot in the doorway to block her from slamming the door closed. "Ma'am, your husband, he's back at the drive-thru where I work. There was a monster. It scratched his face. He's dead." "What kind of nonsense are you spouting, young man? If you think this is some kind of joke, do I look like I'm laughing? Do I look like I'm laughing? Now get bloody lost, will you? What's wrong with you? Are you high on drugs or something?" "Your husband is dead, Prissy. He's dead." Dead? She asks me, scowling, as if trying to ponder whether I'm having a laugh or being deadly serious. I would have to be pretty screwed up if I was joking about something like this. "Yes, dead. Dead, I say. He's lying in the parking lot at the drive-thru. He's dead." "Stupid bloody idiot. I told him drink would get the better of him one day. Now out," she says, putting her perfectly manicured hands and long painted talons on my chest and pushing me out of the door. I stood there outside her front door, bemused, disorientated, asking myself, did that really happen? Why did his wife seem so indifferent about her own husband's death? Granted, she had a mouth on her that wanted washing out with soap and water, but surely, even though she and her husband Larry fought continuously like cat and dog, surely she couldn't be so cold, heartless and unmerciful. Little did I know that I ain't seen anything yet, and that this woman's depravity would be as icy cold as a frostbite on your fingers and toes. I decided not to tell the police what I'd seen in the parking lot. but I did say I'd heard something growl and had hightailed it in my neighbour's car back home, as I was so terrified. I was hardly going to tell them what I'd seen. I didn't want to be a laughing stock, and I certainly didn't want them to think I'd lost leave of my senses. The autopsy confirmed that Mr. Beckenridge had died of an actual heart attack, but the scratches on his face were something that baffled the coroner, who confirmed that they had occurred after death. They also said one of his arms had been ripped off his body savagely and was now missing. It was never ever recovered. My bet is that that creature I saw ate it for a light snack. Looking back, I'm convinced that poor Mr. Beckenridge had been drinking and decided he wanted to pick up a burger from the fast food joint to satisfy a hunger. He must have encountered the wolf-like beast and been so petrified that the disabling fear had brought on a deadly heart attack. The beast climbed into the car, scratching his face, and later on returned to the parking bay to enjoy the man's arm as a snack. Needless to say, much to my mother's delight, I gave up working the night shift at the drive-thru, but I never enlightened her as to why, as some things are just best left unsaid. A couple of weeks or so after Mr. Beckenridge had died, I couldn't find a postcard I was looking for inside the house, which my mother thought she'd accidentally thrown out. I am rumbling around in the outside dustbins, and I discover a plain-looking urn with the printed name Larry Beckenridge on its side. To my shock horror, I discover that the urn is not empty. It still contains Larry's ashes. They had been thrown out and discarded with the trash among the empty spaghetti hoops tins and potato peelings. I mean, who does that? I was appalled and thought that there was a grievous mistake, so I quickly went next door to see Prissy. "It's you again," she says, giving me a scowl when she opens the door. "What the hell do you want now, young man?" Her eyes glance down at the urn I'm carrying in my hands. "What are you doing with that?" she asks in a hostile tone. "It's your husband's ashes," I explain. "They accidentally ended up in the dumpster by mistake. I thought you'd want them back." "Well, you thought wrong, didn't you?" she said, pushing me out of the door. "Get out and put that bloody urn back in the dumpster, will you? I don't want my trash regurgitated, thank you very much." And she slams the door violently behind me. Me and my brother Antonio could not believe Prissy's heartlessness, that she could be so cold, calculating and callous. So we decided to take Larry's ashes into the woodgrove and to throw them into the pretty creek there. We said some prayers, tossed his ashes and flowers we'd bought over the water. We watched them float away with a plethora of rose petals. It was very pretty. "I hope you find some peace now, Larry," I say. All of a sudden, a familiar chill runs down my body, a dreadful sense of foreboding. I sense we're being watched, and then I smell the same garbage smell that I smelt at the car lot that bodeful, inauspicious night. So me and my brother hightail it as fast as we can out of there, and I began to wonder if that creature had indeed followed me home that ill-fated night. I still don't know the answer to the question, but suffice to say, I've never dared venture into that woodgrove again. So there you are. That's my story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, when me and my wife Blanche decided that retirement was very much on the cards for us, we left our busy, bustling lives in New York City to retreat to a quiet, more tranquil, idyllic haven in Maine, which is a state in New England in the United States, bordered by New Hampshire to the west, the Gulf of Maine to the southeast, the Canadian provinces of New Brunswick and Quebec to the northeast and the northwest. Me and my wife had visited Maine on numerous occasions for holidays in the past. We were attracted to the bay shore, the jagged coastline, the smoothly contoured mountains, the heavily forested interior, picturesque waterways, low-lying wild blueberry bushes, and delectable seafood cuisine. Let's just say Maine boasts some of the most fabulous seafood restaurants, offering the best lobster and clams that you've ever tasted in your life. Suffice to say, there were many temptations seducing us to live in this part of the world. Me and my wife were exhausted from our tireless property searches and had almost given up bothering to look until we learnt about an attractive property for sale in Andover, Oxford County, set among the mountains and along the Appalachian Trail. We were cautiously watching our wallets, eagerly looking to strike a great deal. By all accounts, this was a colonial property that had been on the market for 4 years and had not been snapped up yet, which seemed rather incredulous for Maine, as property in this part of the world is highly sought after and incredibly desirable. Ostensibly, we had understood that the house was in a great state of repair. It seemed rather bizarre that a house of such historic intrigue, situated on a fabulous property, overlooking picturesque mountain views, was going for such a song. We made an appointment to see the property as soon as possible. I remember I had a good feeling that fate was finally smiling on us magnanimously, and that we may have potentially found the retirement home of our dreams, which would not be very far from our older daughter and our 2 grandchildren. For us it was upsizing rather than downsizing, which is possibly rather strange for a retired couple, but we enjoyed our space, and for so long we had paid a fortune in New York City to live in a tiny self-contained flatlet in a good area, so the idea of having plenty of legroom was very attractive and appealing to us. It was such a beautiful sunny day when me and my wife got ready for our 12 o'clock appointment with an estate agent called Bryce Finnegan. I was feeling as if I had butterflies in my stomach. That morning I only managed to down a cup of coffee, which is highly unusual for me, as it's not much that puts me off starting the day with a good breakfast. My wife had not even managed that. It was literally impossible for her to eat a single thing. She claimed to feel nauseous. Blanche always became flustered when she was excited, and would lose everything moments before we were about to set off. "I can't think where I've put my glasses," she said. "Oh, and I forgot my windbreaker. Where is it? I can't remember where I put it. Supposing it gets cool." I could see my wife was dawdling. She was procrastinating.
"Hurry up, Blanche, dear. We don't want the estate agent thinking that we've blown him off."
I don't think Blanche was intentionally stalling. It was as if she was unconsciously terribly afraid that the hopes we had nurtured together about this property were about to go pear-shaped. We had pinned our hopes on moving to Maine, and this property on paper had almost directly spoken to our hearts, and going at such a great price, it was hard to envisage that there wasn't something terribly wrong with the place. Imagine if it didn't live up to our expectations. Blanche continued her nervous twitching in the car, which was beginning to heartily annoy me. She was fiddling with the buttons on her cashmere sweater and playing with a couple of locks of her grey hair that had escaped her ponytail. My wife looked younger than her years, with a flawless unlined skin, blue eyes and a full head of grey hair, and it suited her.
"Would you stop twitching, dear? You're distracting me."
"I'm scared. Really scared," she says to me. She continues to twiddle her hair.
"What are you scared about, Blanche?"
"About the house, of course. I so want to like it. I want to like it with all my heart. I want to live in Maine, and this house sounds so perfect. But what if I don't like it? What if there really is something wrong with it?"
"Like what?" I ask.
"I don't know, but a colonial house going this cheap? It's suspicious, is it not? I mean, people love heritage houses. So why has this not been snapped up in a heartbeat? I keep thinking black mold, termites, rats. Something's off."
"Sweetheart, you're getting your knickers in a twist all about nothing. Even if we don't like the house, it's not a train smash, nor is it the end of the world. We'll find somewhere else to live. Besides, if there's black mold or an issue with termites, that has to be disclosed to us. They can't hide those kind of things from us."
"But if the house doesn't tick all the boxes, we'll never find a bargain like this again." I bit my lip, knowing my wife's words were absolutely right. It was peculiarly odd that the house hadn't been snapped up sooner. It would be the first question I would ask the estate agent about, I decided to myself privately. When we arrived at the property, the estate agent was standing with his back turned away from us, smoking a cigarette against his truck. On hearing our truck driving down the white dirt road, veering onto the red brick driveway, he quickly threw his cigarette onto the ground, pressing it into the red bricks with his crocodile skin boots, and turned around to look at us as he waited patiently for me to park my truck in the driveway.
"So what do you think?"
I asked my wife, as we stare very briefly at the house. It's beautiful, she piped. So beautiful. I could see tears misting up in her eyes. Imagine living in a place like this. I'm so afraid something's going to go wrong in this viewing. I already feel an attraction to this house, and we haven't even looked inside it yet. The house was a red brick colonial. It was a 2-story rectangular-shaped home. Probably far too big for us, but as I said before, that was not really a concern. We had lived in a cramped New York apartment for far too long, and we would easily welcome all this extra space, especially when the grandchildren came over to stay with us, or our son Russell and his family, that still lived in New York, would possibly enjoy spending their holidays up at the house, and we could easily devote the upper floors to their use. As getting older, we possibly would not be using the upper floor ourselves, unless we installed some kind of a lift system. The house had 5 windows across the front, 3 windows jutting out of the roof, and 4 on the ground floor, 2 on either side of the front door, which was framed by an extended enclosure, with a roof and columns and steps that led to the door. There were modish black shutters outside every window, elegantly matching the black slate roof, giving the house a polished, debonair impression that was pleasing on the eye in its contemporary chic deportment. There was a very tasteful garage right next to the house with an upstairs room, so space on this property seemed to be in bountiful supply. On the horizon were the prepossessing, undulating, folding contours of the mountains that squatted lazily, like voluptuous ladies, sunbathing under a warm sun. The sky was beautiful, without a cloud in sight, while the estate was fringed to the rear by a sumptuous-looking pine forest, where needled boughs vertically pirouetted into the sky, lending a viridescent splendour to the landscape. I climb out of our red Dodge Viper, opening up my wife's door. She climbs out, looking at me nervously. The estate agent is tall. He's 6 foot with a silvery mane of grey hair. Although he's not old, I'd guess he's in his 30s, but his hair has turned grey before its time, but it rather suits him. He reaches out to shake our hands.
Bryce Finnegan, I'm delighted to meet the both of you. I'll be showing you the property today. Do you have any questions before we proceed along our way? I do, as it happens. I understand, from all my research, that this property has been on the market for 4 years now. That's quite a long time. Why has it not sold? Based from what I can see about the pristine condition of the place, you would think it would have been snapped up in a heartbeat. It is a very curious question you ask, Mr. Zimmerman, and honestly, I don't have an answer to give you. We've had a huge amount of interest in this property. It's been under offer over 20 times, and all the offers have just fallen through for the most bizarre reasons, which is why the owners have dropped their asking price. In all my years as an estate agent, I've never seen so many deals fall through like this, for inexplicable reasons, or the buyers just suddenly losing interest and getting cold feet in the property when they were dead set on buying it. Let's just say this is the most idiosyncratic house I've ever had on my books. A house that I thought I would sell the next day, where people have shown so much interest and excitement in the place, and then the offers just fall through left, right and centre. Some of my colleagues believe this place is jinxed, and I'm beginning to believe they might just be right. Now, I do have other properties on my books you might prefer to look at. In truth, I don't fancy my chances of selling this place to you or anyone else. It's almost like the house wants to be left alone and is refusing to be sold. And we've had some mean offers on this place over the last 4 years.
I once heard houses are like people, says my wife, intervening. She studies the house through her eyes rather affectionately, as if the house has rather warmed itself to her. Maybe it's just looking for the right owner. Maybe that's what this is all about. The house is just being very selective.
Never heard that one before, said the estate agent. But, ma'am, I do hope you're right. The owners are on to us all the time to get this place sold, and we're trying our level best.
I rub my hands over my day-old stubble that my daughter insists looks very hip, and that I find rather uncomfortable.
Did the buyers give you any explanation as to why they're actually selling. Yes, they said they wanted to downsize. But I have to tell you, a friend of mine sold them a property in Brunswick, and let's just say it's bigger than this house. So I'm at a loss of words about that. Let's just say the enigmatic peculiarities of people never ceases to amaze me as an agent. At this I'm stumped. They told you they want to downsize, yet they bought a bigger property in Brunswick. That's right. It is very odd, I know. It's about the sum of it, says the estate agent, shrugging his shoulders. Any more questions, or would you like to see the inside of the house now? We'd love to go in, says my wife excitedly. Let's just say I was in absolute awe of this property. It was magnificent. There are no other words to describe it. It was as if no expense had been spared. There were grand entrance-ways, large marble fireplaces, polished wooden floors, glitzy chandeliers, and there was a light approach to millwork and wainscoting. The house was painted in highly desirable neutral shades, and there were black and white tiles in the entrance hall, a huge ornate sweeping staircase, and a state-of-the-art kitchen. I pointed to a side staircase that veered under the main floor. And this? Where does this go to? What are these steps for? Oh, that's the cellar, I was told. I'll lead the way if you like. I followed the estate agent down to the cellar, to find the 2 doors were boarded up very extensively, which I found very bizarre. Why is the cellar boarded up like this? I asked in surprise. Not sure, said the estate agent. The owner said something about it being terribly cold down there. It might be a good place for you to store some wine. That is very peculiar, I say, studying the boarded-up cellar. I mean, they've gone to town on this. They've boarded this place up extensively. It looks like they're trying to keep something out. I mean, couldn't they just keep it locked? It does look rather that way, agreed the estate agent. But as I tell you, people never cease to amaze me. Their quirky habits, their strange behaviours. I can tell you, nothing ever surprises me. Suffice to say, my wife and I held our breaths, praying that nothing would go wrong in the purchasing of this lofty property. After all, with so many sales falling through for the place, we had no reason to believe that the same eventuality that had afflicted so many before us, eager to purchase this place, would not also occur to us. So we crossed our fingers tightly, and of course our toes, and prayed with all our hearts that nothing would go awry. And surprise, surprise, against all the odds, the sale for the property went through seamlessly, without a single hitch. And when Bryce Finnegan phoned us to congratulate us and inform us that we were now the legal owners of the colonial home, I remember he said, "I think your wife was absolutely right. It was clear. The house chose you. It was waiting for the right owners to come along. Congratulations on your new home. I do hope you'll be very happy there." Me and my wife Blanche thought we'd won the lottery. We danced around our kitchen with joy, hugging each other and envisaging a great future that lay ahead of us. We had procured a dream home in Maine at a steal of a price in an idyllic part of the world, where we would retire and enjoy visits from our grandchildren. What could possibly go wrong? 8 months later. Me and my wife Blanche were so happy, so settled in our brand new home. It was all we could have wanted, and so much more. Our buxom property was nestled indulgently in a pristine valley, surrounded by exquisite transfixing views, where the smooth contours of the mountains billowed up demonstratively into the cobalt blue sky, with a Junesque, seductive, commanding but poised grace. The manicured lawn of our backyard boasted a riot of pretty flower beds, along with several mature oak trees that stood out proud, regal, tall, like assertive, self-possessed giants, with powerful trunks, huge branches, flaunting a bounty of verdant leaves. The yard folded seamlessly into a flowery meadow, where knee-high grass was bespeckled with wild flowers, and fringed by the most glorious pine forest, comprised predominantly of eastern white fir trees. It was here where I took Phoenix, our golden retriever, for regular walks.
The forest was covered in pine needles and smelt magnificent. Its paths were steep and precipitous, as smooth stone seemed to cobble the pathway in an upward trajectory, like an old narrow cobblestone street from yesteryear. Suffice to say, our grandchildren frequented our property and adored exploring this woodgrove, delighting in the wildlife that visited our premises, including a black bear that was openly observed at night, looking at us through the windows with its bright yellow eyes, something my grandchildren thought was absolutely marvellous. They had inordinately begged me to make them a treehouse. I've always been very good with my hands that way, and they had pointed to a large oak tree in the middle of the meadow that overlooked the forest as the quintessential perfect location for this house. And their unrepressed, unbridled, contagious enthusiasm about this idea seemed to inspire me to get cracking with the project. But then where would I work? I was thinking of using the outside garage for this when my wife Blanche suggested that I consider using the old cellar that was boarded up. I thought that was a brilliant idea. But to get an idea of whether it was actually an appropriate place for me to work or not, those boards would naturally need to come down. I was more than a little startled at closer inspection how well the doors to the cellar had been bolted, sealed up, clamped and screwed down. It was idiosyncratic behaviour, and looked like the family was actually trying to keep something out, as the anchored doors were fastened so securely they were pretty much deadlocked, rather like Fort Knox. I thought about the estate agent's comments about the quirky, enigmatic behaviour of people, and decided that people who had owned this property before us were rather eccentric. Maybe they thought cellars were damp, musty, mildewed, mouldy, and unventilated, and should be avoided at all costs. People could be strange. With a great deal of banging, pounding, hammering, buffeting and bashing, along with a sheer brute force, coupled by my resolute determination, I finally succeeded in getting those boards down. But it was a laborious, insufferable, draining job, but well worth my tenacious, long-suffering efforts. When I finally opened the cellar door, it protested furiously, as it reluctantly squeaked open. It was crying out to be oiled, that was for sure. I was amazed that the whole place was incredibly dusty, with mouse droppings, spider webs, and a plethora of dust that carpeted and caked everything thickly. But it was an Aladdin's cave for me, a carpenter's dream, the quintessential lumberer workshop, with overhead racks supporting different-sized wooden panels. There was a workbench against one of the walls, where a selection of expensive stationary tools stood up in a precise order. All in great condition. There were a couple of large carpenter's tables, one with piles of wood neatly displayed under it, and there were shelves with plastic containers, perfectly labelled. There were a couple of storage cabinets, and there were portable power tools. Everything a carpenter could possibly need. I was coughing and spluttering as the dust angrily invaded my lungs, and there was a cold, icy chill that enveloped the room. But truly, I didn't care. This cellar was a dream. "Blanche! Blanche!" I called. "Come down! See this! Come and see what I've found here!" Blanche moved down the steps rapidly and gasped. "You've got to be kidding me! Some of this stuff is so expensive, so pricey. This looks like a professional carpenter's workshop. Who in their right mind boards up a room like this and leaves all this stuff behind them? You've got to admit, it's weird." I discovered some splotches of blood in one corner of the workshop that hadn't been cleared up, which I found peculiar. At first I thought they were rust stains of some kind, but the trajectory of the splattering against the wall and the floor looked ominously like blood. I discreetly cleaned it all up with a damp, warm cloth, deciding I didn't want my wife to know about this, as her imagination would likely draw some horrifying conclusions. I thought I figured out what must have happened here. It would also explain a lot. I think perhaps the owner had had an accident of some kind, and his wife had put her foot down and told her husband he was not to go near his power tools again, and boarded up his workshop. People can overreact when someone has an accident. I'd seen it before. I knew a woman who fell off her horse and sold the horse the very next day, as if in some way the horse was entirely responsible for her fortuitous fall. You know the saying, a bad workman always blames his tools. Before long I was working in my workshop every day, with the radio blaring away happily in the background, offering me entertainment to while away the long hours. My wife told me she wanted an outdoor table and chairs before I actually planned the treehouse for my grandchildren, so I was working on and off between two projects. I could not comprehend for the life of me why my cellar was so numbingly cold, even in the middle of a scorching, sizzling hot summer. Sometimes my frosty hands would go so numb it was hard to work in those icy, frigid conditions. Even when I breathed out, there'd be a polar white mist blowing out of my mouth. And in the hot summer months, that's not normal. I brought down a gas heater to warm up the room, but despite my very best industrious efforts, the heater did nothing to remove or even moderately improve the piercing Arctic chill. It seemed as if the supercilious, inhospitable cellar was perennially insistent on remaining like a freezer. Truly, it would have been the perfect room as a walk-in refrigerator for a chef. My golden retriever Phoenix, who liked to lie at my feet routinely, refused to enter that cellar, but would stand outside the door, growling, her hair standing on end. Sometimes she would bark as if she could see someone standing there that she didn't like, and then she would whimper and trot away, where she would hang around with my wife all day, until I'd finished spending time in the cellar, and then she would dutifully return to my side. She would sniff me intently, as if I'd been hanging around with other dogs, and her tail would stop wagging. I'd often wonder what she was actually smelling on me, because whatever it was, she didn't like it. "I wonder why Phoenix refuses to go into that cellar," my wife would say. Within days of working in the cellar, strange things began to happen, things I could not explain. I'd get this horrible feeling I was not alone. I could feel a presence so clearly in the room with me, so much so that I would turn around and say, "Blanche, is that you?" But no one was there. The feeling was so bodefully airy, spooky, hauntingly discomposing, incredibly unsettling. I'd feel as if a hostile, malevolent, hateful pair of eyes were boring into me, but nothing was there. I felt so watched, so studied, so observed. The radio would start to go static, and a growl would emanate from the radio, and I'd think, what the hell? Where did that growl come from? I would finally examine the radio, checking it thoroughly, and would get it to work all over again. But then it would skip to different channels all on its own, and sometimes become static again, and then I would hear that growling sound. I decided the radio was on the blink, so I switched it off and continued to work. On one occasion, I felt a cold air blowing against my face, as if someone was breathing on me. I would run my hand across my neck and think to myself, am I going mad? Was this cold air in the cellar playing tricks with my mind? I'd often smell the sulphurous, rotten smell. It would be there 1 minute and gone the next. I really thought I was losing it. A bad smell doesn't just vanish like that. Never once did it occur to me that something outer-worldly might be going on. At this time my wife was beginning to experience strange things herself in the house, but she chose to keep these accounts a clandestine secret from me, lest I would accuse her of going stir-crazy. Blanche's account. I will admit, the moment those doors to the downstairs cellar were open, the energy in our home changed dramatically, and I noticed it at once. I was exceedingly bothered about our golden retriever's reaction to the cellar. I knew it wasn't natural for our easy-going dog to react so adversely to a room in our home, and when my husband returned from working with his lumber, Phoenix would smell him all over. It was curiously bizarre behaviour that I could not fathom. Sometimes she smelt something on him that she found abhorrent. She would growl at that spot on his clothing, as if she was warning off a violent thug. One day when my husband is working in the cellar, I was making a cake using my Kenwood mixer and filling 2 cake tins with chocolate cake mix. I walk over to the sink that overlooks pretty views onto the backyard and place the dirty dishes into the warm soapy suds. I'm washing one of the dishes when I happen to glance up, and I see what I can only describe as a figure darting past the window. It happened so quickly that I thought to myself, I must have imagined things. It was a trick of the light. I mean, it was so blurry, so vague. I meandered to the kitchen door and glanced outside, calling, "Hello!" Is anyone out there? But I'm met by a wall of stiff silence. But an uneasy feeling trickles down the back of my spine. I didn't see anything, but I smell the most obnoxious odour, like nothing I've ever smelt before or since. It was like a sulphurous, rotting smell, but the scent dissipates, almost as if I never smelt it at all. I shake my head, returning to my kitchen, only to find that my kitchen has become as cold as an icebox, and there is an ominous trail of muddy footprints all over the kitchen floor. To my amazement, the prints are shaped like a massive dog, or a wolf or something like that, but the paws are humongous in size, much, much bigger than a dog. I don't know of a dog that could have paws this big. What the hell? What the hell? What the hell are these? I think. For a moment I think that something creeped into the kitchen a moment ago, when I went outside for a brief second. But how could they have got past me? A dangerous animal of some kind. A mountain lion, perhaps. No, that's a crazy notion. I pull out a knife from my knife block and search the kitchen, but nothing is there. I suddenly realise that Phoenix is nowhere to be seen. But then, when I find her, she's cowering behind the door of the pantry and trembling like a leaf. Moments later I feel this icy wind blowing past me, like a hairdryer of freezing air, and then the kitchen door slams closed on its own, as if being blown back by a huge gust of wind. The trouble is, there's no wind out there. I'm about to call my husband to point out these strange anomalies, but the muddy paw prints have gone, and I'm now beginning to feel terribly silly. What's wrong with me? Then a horrible thought enters my mind. I'm getting older. Could I be losing my mind and getting some kind of neurological disease, some form of Alzheimer's? Please God, no. I don't want to end up being completely dilly. But I remind myself that Phoenix has reacted to something adversely, and that I'm not imagining, so I can't be losing it, surely. I get down on my hands and knees and cuddle my dog in my arms to reassure him. I can see that Phoenix is quivering. A small tormenting voice whispers to me, "Blanche, you're going mad. You're going mad. You're going mad." Either that or something is going on in my home. The next few days are routinely uneventful. I'm beginning to think that the strange events I thought had happened were all but a figment of an overactive imagination on my part. I'm in the kitchen making a chicken pot pie. I'm creating a bechamel sauce and have stripped a cooked chicken of all its meat, when I suddenly feel an icy chill descend over the kitchen. It is so conspicuously dramatic that it sends a feeling of dread burning through my body. It is then that I feel something or someone blowing on my neck. I turn around from the range with a wooden spoon in my hand, and I see that Phoenix has her lips curled back. She's growling at something fiercely, but there's nothing there. When I say there's nothing there, that's not entirely true, because I unequivocally knew there was actually something there. But the trouble was I couldn't see it at all, but I could feel it with every single fibre of my being. And whatever this thing was, it was insanely evil, grotesquely despicable. Phoenix had plunged herself in front of me protectively. She continues to growl and snarl at what I can only describe as an evil entity or presence. The next thing I know, the back door of my kitchen flings furiously open on its own accord. The door crashes angrily against the outside wall. Phoenix is hauled into the air like a netball, about 8 feet off the ground, as if she's been flung onto someone's shoulders. She looks terrified. Her ears are pinned back. She's oscillating her paws, trying to defend herself. She's hurled out of the door so violently, like a soccer ball. Phoenix crashes to the ground, and for a dreadful moment, I think she's dead. I sigh with relief when she whimpers, finally staggers to her feet, and runs away from our house, charging as fast as she can towards the woodgrove. In a trice, the cold air seems to rush past me and give chase. I can see Phoenix dashing away. She continues to run, while dreadful images flood my imagination. That thing, whatever it is, I know it's going to kill Phoenix. I know it. My whole body convulses, as if I'd been standing in a puddle of water and been electrocuted. You'd think I'd scream, call my husband, do something. But I found myself just peeing on the kitchen floor.
My whole body shivers and quakes, as if I've been exposed to the blistering conditions of Arctic air in Siberia. I want to scream, but nothing comes out of my dry, scratchy throat. My mouth bobs open and closes for several times, but nothing comes out. The bechamel sauce is burning on the hob, the contents of the pan now black. A noxious, acrid, offensive, bitter smoke fills the kitchen. I pick up the pot, throwing it out of the kitchen door as fast as I can. The smoky contents of the sauce splatter over the yard, the steam rising up from the blades of grass, now singed. With trembling hands, I quickly open the windows in the kitchen to help the noxious smoke to escape and to get rid of that choking smell that is making me splutter and cough. I'm then reminded that Phoenix is in serious trouble, so with a kitchen knife in my hand, I run across the pristine mowed lawn, over the flowery meadow, into the pine forest. I'm afraid of what I will find. In truth, I'm expecting to find Phoenix lying there dead, her body splattered brutally across the woodgrove. With that ghastly entity chasing after her, I feel discouraged at best, completely discomposed at worst. Whatever had so maliciously flung our dog out of the kitchen door and given her chase, this thing, whatever it is profoundly evil, wicked. I can feel the bile rising up in the back of my throat. My whole body feels vacuously empty, hollow. I'm numb from a crippling, incapacitating fear, the likes of such I have never known before, as this is a disturbing, debilitating feeling that I'm not acquainted with. My throat is limp and flaccid, like an inoperable muscle that no longer works, for nothing comes out of my mouth. Try as I might to call my dog's name, I just can't. To my horror, my worst fears are coming to fruition, as I see these huge dog-like footprints that I'd seen in my kitchen, embedded in the dark earthen soil. The evil creature is out here, after my dog. I discover a long bundle of familiar blonde hair, snagged and tangled up in a large hairy lump on a bramble bush, and there is blood in this blonde hair. My heart flip-flops and somersaults in my chest, because I know that the hair belongs to my dog. Now I'm absolutely certain. I know Phoenix is dead, with an irrefutable certainty. I suddenly hear the sound of heavy feet crunching through leafy debris, snapping branches. Something is moving towards me, and whatever it is, it's very big. Oh my God! Oh my God! I want to run away, but I just can't. I'm frozen to the spot like a waxwork statue at Madame Tussauds. I can't even activate a single muscle of mine. What is wrong with me? Where is the adrenaline surge that's supposed to help me get the hell out of here? Then I see it. It's a tall human-like creature, covered in long blonde hair, the colour of a polar bear. But he has the face of a human, with the kindest eyes I've ever beheld. And in his arms, he's holding my beloved Phoenix. My dog! My dog is alive! My dog is alive! This thing is easily 8 foot tall, 700 pounds, with a cone-shaped head and overlong arms that travel beyond the knees. I realise at once that this creature is a Bigfoot. I know this because I've watched programmes with my grandchild called Finding Bigfoot. "Do you think that Bigfoot is real?" my grandson Adam had asked me excitedly, with eyes shining so brightly. I didn't have the heart to dampen his animated ebullience. I mean, how could I? My grandson looked so earnest. "Of course he's real," I said. "Of course he's real." "I want to meet Mr. Bigfoot," said my grandson. "I want to meet him one day." I had smiled at Adam's enthusiasm and brought him things associated with Bigfoot for his birthdays and Christmas. I even bought him a T-shirt which read, "Bigfoot is king of the woods," and another which said, "Abominable snowman is real." According to my daughter, he loved those T-shirts so much that he refused to wear any other T-shirts. So much so that the print was now fading, the shirts were worn out, and my daughter desperately wanted me to replace them, as they were looking tatty, and she was embarrassed about her son's now shabby appearance. So like any dutiful grandmother, I'd sent out orders for more of these T-shirts.
I am so shocked by what I'm beholding. I feel as if I've been flung into an alternative universe. Suffice to say, never in 1,000 months of Sundays would have I ever envisaged that this creature could possibly be real. Not for a single moment. I knew my grandchild would have given anything in the world to see what I was seeing now. The benevolence of this Bigfoot is so discernible that not for a single moment do I feel even an iota of fear. It is like I've been hugged with an effusive feeling of security and safety, as if I now know that nothing bad can happen to me while I'm in this creature's presence. His energy is serene, his eyes so gentle. Whoever said eyes are the mirror of the soul, they're not wrong. This mellow, easy-going Bigfoot is not at all evasive or timorous, but actually bold. He moves towards me, squatting onto his legs, while holding my dog in his arms, to show me a huge weeping bite on Phoenix's neck that is bleeding and looks very swollen. I examine the bite on my dog's neck. It's nasty, inflamed, angry. I stroke my dog, while the Bigfoot holds her in his arms. Phoenix licks my hand affectionately, looking quite sorry for herself, as I think she clandestinely is rather enjoying all the fuss. The Bigfoot places Phoenix on the ground. She buoyantly bounds over to me, thrashing her tail on the ground excitedly, as if all the hair-raising events that have just gripped us so wretchedly only moments before have bounded away like a golf ball on the green, and long since been forgotten about, by her maybe, but not by me. It's not difficult to determine that this blonde Bigfoot rescued Phoenix from an invisible demonical entity that had bitten into her neck so viciously. It is clear to me that this is what transpired. Without a shadow of a doubt, Phoenix seems to have warmed significantly to this idiosyncratic creature, but then I think she probably realizes he must have saved her life, and she's a highly intelligent dog. The Bigfoot insists on escorting us through the forest. He seems very concerned about our safety and well-being. It feels as if I'm walking next to a friend, as if it's the most natural thing in the world to do, as if we've known each other for many lifetimes. When we move towards a moist open area of soil, the Bigfoot squats down on his muscular thighs, pointing to a huge dog track in the ground, similar to what I'd seen in my kitchen before. I realize in that elucidatory moment that it's possibly the track of a huge wolf-like beast. Definitely not a dog. It's too enormous for that. But one that patently is not of this world, unless it possesses remarkably skilled cloaking abilities that render him invisible, which I seriously doubt. The Bigfoot points at the print, and then to the weeping bite on my dog's neck. He begins to arrange some stones in a circle. He places a random stone in the middle of the circle, and then points to the wolf track in the ground. All of a sudden, a curious, illustrative and explanatory information appears to be downloaded in my mind, like a telepathic exchange of some sort. And then I hear a man's voice speaking directly through me, with a deep, commanding, authoritative tone that cannot be dismissed as just rambling or disjointed thoughts that belong to me. Not at all. This voice is prodigiously informative, and it's certainly not mine. You have a demonic entity in your home. You need to lock him up in a confined space, and all will be well. I look at the Bigfoot, my mouth dropping open. Did he just speak to me? It would seem so. I then have a divulgence that illuminates my mind with an epiphany. Of course, when my husband had removed the wooden panels on the door to the cellar that had been bolted shut for so long, could the previous owners have been having problems with this demonic creature and managed to contain him for some reason within the cellar? It would certainly explain why all those high-quality carpentry tools had been left abandoned. The previous owners had been terrified of a beast that had been tormenting them and was now tormenting us, and of course my dog. It would seem that my husband had inadvertently let something out into our house, something grotesquely evil, perversely depraved, degenerately immoral, and very ungodly. The Bigfoot is nodding at me. He's read my thoughts. My God, he has. He knows exactly what I'm thinking, and he confirms my thoughts.
The Bigfoot then escorts me and Phoenix further through the forest, and I'm just so thankful to him. I know he saved my dog, and his advice may very well save me and my husband. Is my husband, though, going to believe a word I tell him? Somehow I doubt it. To date, he's never expressed any feelings about anything untoward going on in our house, but he'd have to agree that Phoenix wanted nothing to do with that cellar and appeared to growl at something in there. How will I ever make my husband appreciate that we urgently need to lock up this entity in the cellar? How would we do it? What if my husband didn't believe me? It seemed my story about the Bigfoot was likely to make him think I was literally losing my marbles. And if I was wearing his shoes, I would certainly think that that was the case. But it's a risk I'm going to have to take. For if we don't address the skeleton in the cupboard, this thing will ultimately destroy us. I can hear my husband working in the cellar, so I decide to take Phoenix to the vet, as his wound is really inflamed and beginning to swell quite considerably. The vet is a very agreeable middle-aged man. He smells as if he not only smokes cigarettes, but eats them too. I've actually heard raving reviews about him from the locals in the area. I was told he had Cushing's disease, lost a ton of weight, and been informed by his doctors to give up smoking. But let's just say it looks like he's fighting a losing battle. I notice a couple of boxes of nicotine patches standing propped up against some medical supplies on the shelf. And it somehow humanizes him to me, making him much more approachable, as it's clear his life is not without personal struggle. "How can I help you?" the vet asks me, as he places Phoenix onto the examining table. "I'm just concerned about my dog. She's been bitten by something." The vet shaves the area around the bite, and he audibly gasps. "Did you see what bit your dog, by any chance? This is an extraordinary bite. I've not seen anything like this before." "No, I didn't," I say, which is partially true, but I was hardly going to say that he was bitten by a demonic, invisible entity that seems to have the feet of a wolf. "This is a very deep bite, very wide. What could it be?" he says. "What do you think it is?" I ask him. "Well, it looks like it's a wolf, but something very, very large." I shrug my shoulders. I don't know what bit him," I say. Gabriel's account. I was beginning to worry that something obstreperously inauspicious was going on in our home. I'd never been a man who believed in the paranormal, or things that go bump in the night, but something was inexpediently happening in our home, and while I tried to brush it off and find rational explanations and plausible answers for the bizarre threatening incidents, I could not. One night after I dressed into my pyjamas, brushed my teeth and pulled back the sheets of our bed, I almost jumped out of my skin to find a bloody dead pigeon had been ripped apart, its liver, kidneys, legs and heart splattered and sprawled all over the bed, the white sheets bespeckled by blood. It was an infelicious, macabre scene, and there were hundreds of big, fat, wiggling maggots clawing their way on the insides of this pigeon with an insatiable urgency and ravenous appetite. The indelicate sight was grotesque. I wanted to hurl up the contents of my stomach. It was so repugnant. We didn't have a cat at the time, and although Phoenix enjoyed retrieving things, I'd never seen him pick up a dead bird or even a rabbit before. So if this pigeon was his work, he had done a great job of creating a grisly scene that looked far too meticulously arranged for it to be the work of a dog, almost as if something or someone was antagonistically trying to scare the living daylights out of us. It was working. I didn't know what to make of this, but I grimaced and cleared up the mess, changing the sheets and trotting downstairs, quickly throwing them into the washing machine and placing the dead bird, or what was left of it, and the maggots in a plastic bag, which I binned discreetly, away from my wife. Blanche was looking at me with a bewildered expression on her face. "Why on earth are you washing bed sheets at this time of the night? I changed the sheets yesterday. They're perfectly clean." "No, they're not. My fountain pen leaked," I say gingerly. "I spilled ink all over the sheets. It went everywhere." My wife groans. "They're probably ruined now. I'm not actually sure ink comes out of bedding." I was so relieved she'd been downstairs making cocoa when all this had transpired.
I know she'd have freaked out seeing all that blood and guts. It was ever since I'd opened that cellar downstairs that I would notice cold gusts of air blowing past me in the house. It was so airy, so creepy, almost as if someone made of ice had walked right past me. But when I turned around, nothing was ever there. It was easy to think I was losing my mind, and sometimes I thought I was. But I always got the distinct impression me and my wife were being watched, and we were beginning to find increasing cold spots around the house, which neither of us could explain. One day I woke up in the morning and went downstairs to have some coffee and a jam donut. I then retreated to the bathroom to brush my teeth and to enjoy my regular morning shave. To my abject horror, when I was shaving, I noticed this red scratch on my neck. So I pulled off my t-shirt and discovered 3 big long scratches across my chest. They were deep gashes that looked like something with sharp claws had scratched me violently. I was so shocked. What the hell, I think? Then I remember the grievous nightmare of the previous night. I'd seen a wolf-like creature of about 9 foot tall, with a wolf-like face, human body, and wolf-like claws attached to his hands. The creature hovered above my body, floating over me, snarling down at me, glaring at me with abhorrent, blazing red eyes. He was screaming at me, "Get out! Get out! Get out! I will kill you! I will kill you! Get out!" But I thought it was a bad dream. Now I wasn't so sure. I'd woken up with a cold sweat, my pyjamas completely drenched, very soaked. I'd never had such a lucid nightmare before. It had rattled me to my core, but there was no way I was going to tell Blanche about this. She'd think I was losing my mind. But these scratches were evidence that I wasn't. But I knew better than to tell her about what had happened. I didn't want to alarm her. As Blanche, if she knew about this, she'd do her nut and blow everything out of proportion. There was a rational explanation for this, and I'd get to the bottom of this enigmatic, incongruous mystery. See if I didn't. I retreat down to the cellar to continue with my carpentry work. And when I enter, I notice that someone has completely scribbled over the plans I'd drawn up for the treehouse for my grandchildren. I know my wife, Blanche, adores our grandchildren, and was so excited about the treehouse I was designing. Who had done such a vengefully wicked thing like this? It couldn't have been her. I was devastated. It had taken a great deal of work to draw up those plans. I sit down on my workbench and start to redraw the plans for the treehouse while they're still very clear in my mind. I nearly jump out of my skin when I hear this dreadful, inauspicious growl. The only way I can describe it is that there was absolutely something in my cellar. I knew at once. It had to be a demon. What else could it be? I started to say, "Our Father who art in heaven," and this thing threw me violently to the ground. I could feel claws holding me down, and this thing, whatever it was, didn't seem to like my prayers, because it bolted out of the cellar. Now I knew what needed to be done. Later that morning, my wife appeared to have disappeared. I noticed her truck was no longer in the driveway, and Phoenix was nowhere to be found. She had left the place with an acrid smell in it. There was a burnt pot lying on the lawn, next to some singed grass. She returned home after having been to the vet, and began to recount her incredulous tale to me. Now I have to tell you, if she told me that story a few days ago, I would have thought my wife was smoking something hallucinogenic and been spending far too much time with our Bigfoot-loving grandson. But I knew, as absurd as my wife's tale appeared to be, in the grand scheme of things, it was absolutely true, and I was in no doubt about that. "We have a demon in this house. The Bigfoot was telling me telepathically that it has to be contained, that it's very dangerous, that it's getting stronger. That's why the previous people locked up the cellar. They knew what was going on. They knew they were dealing with a demon. That's probably why they sold the house in the first place. When you opened it up, we let out this thing, and it appears to be getting stronger and stronger. It's already bitten Phoenix, who would have died without the Bigfoot's intervention. I'm in no doubt about that. God only knows what he'll do to us. We're in very grave danger.
I feel it in my bones. We have to get that creature back into the cellar. Suffice to say, it was decided we'd bolt windows and doors and get a priest around to bless every single room in the house, and that the prayers would eventually force the demon down into the cellar, and then we would bolt it in there to keep it contained. It was clear that this is what the previous owners had probably done. Me and my wife Blanche waited on tender hooks with bated breath until the Catholic priest arrived at our home. He had dealt with demonic activity in homes before, with a great measure of success, and we were reasonably confident that he would be able to help us. His name was Ivan Clark. He brought with him a psychic medium called Zoe, whom had helped him with many of his house cleansings in the past. We had informed Ivan Clark through emails what had been happening in our home, and he emphatically believed that we were dealing with a demonic entity of some kind. From the moment they entered our property, Zoe began to shudder and shake involuntarily. I feel a great evil in this house, an ancient, despicable evil. It has resided on this piece of land for hundreds of years, if not thousands. It has an attachment to the land upon which this property resides, for it was conjured up from the pits of hell itself. He is the kind of demon that will give you true answers to your questions. It was invited into our reality through some kind of sacrificial offering, but this happened a long, long time ago, through an innocent who had no idea what they were actually doing. It would like to throw you out of this house. It would like to harm you and kill you. I have to warn you that the more fearful you become, the stronger he will get. If you want to give a demon steroids, you feed him with your fear. He will bulk up considerably. I need all of you to be very strong, however hard it may be. I want you to refuse to be afraid. As if you do that, you starve the demon, reduce his power. Let's just say Zoe was the last person I would ever imagine a psychic to look like, but it was clear the Catholic priest hung on to her every word and respected everything she had to say. She was such an unassuming woman, petite and willowy, the kind of person so delicate and fragile, so dainty, you could almost imagine her being blown over by a powerful wind. She had these fine, delicate porcelain features, dark black hair, it done in a pixie haircut, and blue eyes that were so earnestly serious. It was hard to imagine a girl so small and slight could stand up to the hostile venom that had pierced its poisonous fangs into our home, determined to make us victims of its wrath. As a team we walked around the house together, while Zoe burnt incense and the Catholic priest scattered holy water into every room. We all prayed out loud St. Michael's prayer of protection. St. Michael, the archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of heavenly hosts, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all his evil spirits, who wander through the earth for the ruin and damnation of souls. While we were doing this, there were disembodied spectral growls and snarls ringing through the house that was so terrifyingly hostile. The piercing, stinging sound literally reverberated through our bodies, causing us all to tremble and shake. But we had to hold it together and keep our composture. Pictures were flung off hooks, vases and china were catapulted across rooms, violently crashing to the ground, and even a bowl of potpourri was propelled across the wall like a frisbee, so the floor was scattered with dried rose petals and petite pine cones. If one of us had been caught in the crossfire, we could have been seriously hurt and even killed. I wanted to bolt out of the house as fast as I could. I was so overwhelmed with a pulverizing terror, but I reasoned if my wife could hold it together so stoically, then so could I. I tried so hard not to focus on the feeling of dread that seemed to consume me. I've got a name, says Zoe suddenly. The demon you have in this house is called Marchesai. He commands 30 legions of demons. He's powerful. He's a wolf in a man's form, with griffin wings and a serpent's tail. We continued all our prayers, until the only room that was left was the cellar. He's in there, says Zoe. Board up the cellar now. Lock him in there. Keep him contained. It's the best way to do that with a demon like this. because if we cast him out, he will more than likely return to this house. This demon is a powerful fighter, with a resolute determination, and he will stop at nothing to get back to this property, when the conditions are ripe, of course. If you lock him up downstairs in the cellar, he'll never be able to bother you again. When the demon realized he was trapped in the room, he let out the most gut-wrenching scream, followed by a deep guttural roar. I don't know how I held it together, but I managed to bolt the doors down incredibly well, so that the demon could not escape. I boarded absolutely everything down, and hung a crucifix on the door, and stuck up the protective prayer of St. Michael. Suffice to say, life returned to normal in our home. You might think it odd that me and my wife Blanche live in a house where we have contained an evil energy, but it doesn't worry us, as long as we keep the evil contained, and if we ever sold the house again in the future, we would ultimately tell any potential buyers about the demon in our cellar. But of course, whether they would believe us or not is entirely up to them. In the beginning we heard growling coming from the cellar, but now we hear nothing, possibly because the demon is getting weaker and weaker, locked away in the cellar and unable to escape. You would think that this would be the end of my curious, enigmatic story, but not so. I soon began to build the treehouse for my grandchildren that I'd promised them. These were my older grandchildren, who lived not far away from us in Maine, and were my daughter's children. Adam was 11, Natalia was 10. My son and his 2 children lived in New York. His children were still running around in diapers and were toddlers. I knew that Adam and Natalia would be over the moon to play in a treehouse overlooking the woodgrove. The job was not easy, but I managed to complete the treehouse for my grandchildren when they came to stay with us for a couple of weeks in the summer holidays, while my daughter and her husband went on holiday to Greece. Blanche was so excited about having the grandchildren to stay. She bustled around the house like a buzzing bee, preparing the children's bedrooms for them, her face continuously smiling. "I love our grandchildren," she said. "I can't wait to see how they will react when they see the treehouse." Let's just say it looked amazing. A perfect rectangular-shaped house, with large windows that overlooked the countryside, and a staircase that wound around the tree, that led to a gleaming bright red door, as red was Adam's favourite colour. My wife had made pretty cushions, bedspreads and curtains in the treehouse. We put a table in there, a bench and a couple of sofas. My grandson Adam was an interesting boy, with so much going on in that little head of his, but he was not a big talker. He was quite unassuming as a boy, and could be very absorbed by anything that inspired his imagination. Adam was completely fascinated with Bigfoot, and got grievously upset if any boys at his school said anything nasty about the creature. One boy at his school, called Mark Dundledine, was constantly ridiculing him about his huge passion for Bigfoot. "My daddy says that Bigfoots are very, very bad. They're horrible, and they smell really, really bad, and they eat humans for breakfast." Adam had gone home to his mother in tears. My daughter Nicole, who did not believe in Bigfoot, could see how distressed Adam had become, and reassured him. "You know what, Adam," she said. "If Bigfoots are true, then they're good ones and they're bad ones. Everything has its intrinsic opposite, you know. You have good and bad people, good and bad angelic beings, good and bad apples. There's good and evil in the world, so you can tell your friend Mark that there may be bad Bigfoots out there, but there must be good ones too. You tell him that, won't you?" My grandchild had gone back to school and informed his friend that you got good and evil angels and you got good and bad Bigfoot. Mark had stuck his tongue out rudely at my grandson. "You're stupid to think that the hairy creatures are nice. My daddy says they're ugly, and if you saw one, well, he says if he sees one, he's going to shoot it dead." Adam had been disgusted with Mark's comments and became very protective towards Bigfoot. "You're the one that's stupid," he said back to the boy. "You think that Bigfoot is bad because your dad says he's bad, but you don't even know if that's true." The young boy had proudly boasted, "My dad is a clever man, and he's right about everything." I had to smile when I heard this, as I remember when I was 10 years old myself. I thought the sunshine shone out of my father's backside, and he could do no wrong. But as I got older,
I realised that my father was far from perfect and had lots of flaws in his character. My wife Blanche had brought little Adam Bigfoot t-shirts, which he wore so proudly, but now they were worn out and faded, so she'd got him some new ones with signs that read, "I love Yeti. My favourite celebrity is Mr. Bigfoot, and I don't care what you think of me, but I know BF is real." My grandson supported Bigfoot like you might support your favourite soccer team, and he would not hear a bad word said about the idiosyncratic creature. My wife wisely decided not to tell my grandson about the blonde Bigfoot she'd encountered. He was so fired up about the subject. If he knew there was potentially one loitering around in our woodgrove, he would stop at nothing to find it. We didn't want that happening. Me and my wife never told our grown children about the demonic entity in our home, because let's just say Nicole would have overreacted and insisted we needed to sell our property, and that was not going to happen. The truth was we loved our home. Life could not have been better for us. My grandchild Natalia was a practical girl, and a great deal more talkative than her brother, but they seemed to interact well with each other, and enjoyed playing together. My daughter Nicole dropped our grandchildren off on a Sunday afternoon. She and her husband were flying to Greece that evening. When I showed our 2 grandchildren the treehouse, they were literally over the moon, and Adam gave me a huge hug. "Thanks, Gramps. You're the best. I love it. I just love it." My grandchildren would occupy themselves for hours every day in that treehouse. Adam's story. I was give or take 10 years old at the time, when me and my sister stayed with my grandparents, and very close to my sister Natalia. I was a quiet child. I hasten to say I'm equally as reserved and reticent today. It's not really that I'm actually shy. It's more that I don't really like to talk, unless I have something really worthwhile and important to say. But I am a deep thinker, and have always been a great listener. I'm passionate about listening to stories, which for me are far more riveting than ever watching a movie. The ancients knew this, and tapped into the secrets of storytelling, which was a quintessential part of their lives. I imagine they would gather around a crackling fire, listening to their elders, and the stories would inspire their imagination and allow them to dream. From the first time I listened to a Bigfoot story, I was enamoured by this curious creature, wandering in the woods of North America, with an uncanny similarity to human beings, and I absolutely knew they were real. I didn't doubt that for a fleeting second. One boy in my school, a slightly overweight, rather obnoxious kid called Mark, who possessed a haughty, stuck-up, rather entitled attitude, who hung on to every word his father said, as if it was the gospel truth, but never once did he think for himself or make his own decisions. Mark knew I loved Bigfoot, as every kid's party I attended I would wear a t-shirt announcing my love for the creature. It would seem that Mark loved to ridicule me, not because I believed in Bigfoot, but because I loved him. "You're stupid. How can you love a big, hairy, smelly creature? My dad says they're horrible, and they all deserve to be shot." Mark upset me at first, but in the end I refused to allow anything mean he said to discompose me. Honestly, he wasn't worth it. Besides, it was possibly true, I discerned. There were likely to be mean Bigfoot out there, dangerous even. But so were there mean and dangerous human beings in the world. But it did not mean that you could tarnish all humans with the same soiled brush. The same could be said for Bigfoot. As you can imagine, I was excited to be spending 2 weeks in the summer holidays with my grandparents. My pops had told me he'd built us a treehouse overlooking the woodgrove on his property. I knew that me and Natalia would be playing there an awful lot, and we most certainly did. My grandmother spoilt us rotten, making us cakes and homemade lemonade. We even had picnics up in the treehouse, while Phoenix, the golden Labrador, would trot up the staircase and lie in the treehouse with us, happy to eat up any leftover cake. And my grandmother complained bitterly that Phoenix was getting terribly fat. It never occurred to her we were overfeeding her. We loved the dog. She was beautiful, with such an incredible kind temperament and calming laid-back nature. My grandparents lived in a beautiful house, but I had noticed the cellar downstairs had been boarded up, and there was a cross and a St. Christopher's prayer on the outside door. It was cold and damp in that spot, with a dark energy you could actually palpably feel. It made me wonder if my pops was keeping something really bad locked up in the cellar, but I didn't dare ask him about it. "Go on, knock on the wooden panels of the cellar. Go on, do it. See if there's anything inside," Natalia had said to me. I hesitated for a brief moment and decided it was a good idea. So I knocked on the wooden panel, and something banged against the inside door. It was such a hard noise, and then we heard a scratching sound, followed by a huge disembodied growl. It terrified us out of our wits, so we ran away, our bodies trembling from the shock. "There's something horrible in there," said Natalia. Suffice to say, we never ever went back to the cellar again, nor did we ask my pops what had been locked away in there. Even we did not want to know the answer to that enigmatic question. But whatever it was, we knew it was really bad. Suffice to say, me and my sister played a lot in the treehouse. My sister Natalia loved to clean it up, shine the windows, dust the furniture. She made the treehouse shiny, like a new pin, bringing in flowers from the field to put on the middle of the table. One day I noticed Phoenix becoming animated. Her tail was thumping excitedly. She dashed into the woodgrove, as if she was greeting a familiar stranger that she knew and loved. "You stay over there," I told my sister. "I'm going to see what Phoenix is all excited about." I climbed down the stairs and ran after Phoenix into the woodgrove. I see Phoenix sitting down on the earthen floor. Her tail is thumping excitedly, and that's when I realise her dark eyes are looking up adoringly at a blonde Bigfoot. Although I'd believed in Bigfoot all my life, never once did I ever believe I'd see one for myself. Of course I'd dreamed and visualised an encounter with the beast in my childlike enthusiastic imagination, hundreds of times over in fact, but seeing one close up and personal was something I never imagined would happen to me. I rubbed my eyes, thinking that I have to be dreaming. This can't be real. The blonde Bigfoot is patting Phoenix, and I get the sense they're well acquainted, and that there's a great bond between the two of them. The Bigfoot looks up at me with bright eyes. My heart thunders excitedly in my chest. I wish Mark was here now, and could see how beautiful this creature is, because he would have to eat his mean words up for breakfast. She stands up tall, lofty and majestic, like a human being on two legs, is about 8 foot tall and 700 pounds, covered with the hair of a polar bear. I'll never forget how the Bigfoot looked at me, with the most incredible eyes I've ever seen. And there wasn't an evil bone in her body. Her all-consuming energy is so loving, her nature benevolent and gentle. The creature looks up at me with her deep-set dark eyes, and our eyes meet. When she looks at me, it's as if she's looking into my very soul, reading my thoughts. She moves over towards me and puts a stone into my hands, and I hear the words in my head, "I wanted to thank you for your faith in my kind." And then she turned around and glided away. I remember I felt as if I'd met a celebrity I'd been longing to meet for a long time. I put my hand on my heart and went, "Wow! Wow! Wow!" I glanced down at the stone. It may have been an ordinary river stone, but even today I hold on to that river stone and regard it as one of the most precious items that I've ever owned. If I was running out of a burning building, it would be one of the first items I saved. I think my encounter with the Bigfoot was preordained. When you believe in the good, it rebounds in your life. The Bigfoot was thanking me for standing up for her species, for believing in the good. I told my friend Mark I had met a kind blonde Bigfoot who gave me a stone. Mark knew I wasn't inclined to lie, nor exaggerate, so he seemed bewildered by my rather extraordinary revelation, but he believed me. Maybe he was beginning to realise his dad wasn't right about everything. So there you are. That's my story.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my Omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.